Always good to see you.
I was shocked in the agenda that you spelled your name and I saw that.
That's kind of
Ratherman? Like you're so rad.
and then right next to it, they got my little bio thing that I put up there. They spelled correct. Did you see how they spelled Ebbets Pass? EBBITS.
All right, you spelling guys, let's go. Let's get a meeting started.
Spell check.
I'd like to call the meeting to order. Welcome to the Wednesday, May 25th, 2016. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Call the roll, please.
Director Underhill? Here. Director Mills?
Here.
Director Ratterman?
Here.
And Vice President Davidson?
Here. At this time, the item on the agenda is public comment. At this time, members of the public may address the board on any non-agendized item. The public is encouraged to work through staff, place items on the agenda for board consideration. No action will be taken on matters not listed on the agenda. Comments are limited to 5 minutes per person. Is there any public comment today? Seeing none, we'll move on to the consent agenda. The following items are expected to be routine, non-controversial. Items will be acted upon by the board at one time without discussion. Any board member may request that an item be removed for later consideration. Are there any items to be removed?
I want to remove 3B for a minute.
3B? Okay, I have to,
I move for acceptance of 3A and 3C.
I wasn't here on April 6th, so I'm going to have to abstain for that, so I can't vote for both, so I'll have to remove 3A.
Okay.
You don't have to do that, though.
You don't have to.
You can still vote on it if you read it. If you read the minutes, you could still vote on it.
Oh, well, I didn't read it because I wasn't here.
I would second the motion.
Okay, so this is a motion to accept 3C. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries 401.
301.
Yes. 3011? No. Okay, we'll move on to 3B.
Okay, and I really only had, I said a minute, so I would just go to page number 1, check number 13410. This is off of JPIA, the property insurance for $60,374. And I know that we do have a land and property committee that's looking at all of the properties, surplus properties and what have you, and bringing them back to the board. But I was going to say something about the property insurance itself. Have we ever done an audit to make sure that the insurance that we're carrying on the various properties are in fact valid? You know, because many times we go through and we make changes, and of course, whatever we're insuring determines how much we're going to pay in our monthly costs. So I would just like to see or ask if we've ever done that. Are we doing that on a regular basis, or?
Director Underhill, members of the board, Jeffrey Meyer at Admin Services. Just last year, Aqua JPIA, 2 of their employees came out and did a tour of all our facilities, a more in-detail tour. Jim Wagonseller is one of the individuals. He comes, and another Scott, and I can't remember his last name, I apologize for that, Scott Wood. One or the other comes every year and does a visit of all our facilities. This time around, they both came and did a much more detailed audit. So yes, they review everything, and it's reviewed on an annual basis. As far as vehicles, we review all our vehicles and mobile equipment on an annual basis to make sure that we're capturing everything and not showing things that have already been surplused out. So it is reviewed.
Oh, okay with that.
And the Aqua JPIA is a very cost-effective way for us to obtain this insurance because we're able to pool with other like agencies with similar facilities and operations, so that does have I've got to say, my dealings with Aqua JPIA, very impressed with their administration, very cost-effective and very professional.
Is this
But that's
the-
something we would look at if we ever had other opportunities presented to us.
Is this the annual premium? Full annual?
Yeah, annual premium.
Okay.
Anything further on that item? Can I get a motion for
Move
acceptance?
for acceptance of 3A.
B, 3B.
3B.
3B. Oh, okay.
And I would second that motion.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Motion carries. Getting back to 3A, I mean, do I have to abstain from that, or I always thought that was kind of the rule? I wasn't here on the April 6th special board.
There's no requirement that you have to abstain from it.
Okay.
I know you guys, I think that it's been your policy that you've done it in that manner, but there's no ultimate requirement that you have to.
Okay.
I would move for acceptance of 3A.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve 3A. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Motion carries. Okay, we'll move on to item 4, a public hearing. Oh, I'm sorry, we already did 3C. Item 4, public hearing to accept public comment on the district's draft 2015 Urban Water Management Plan update. Peter Martin?
I'll go ahead and just kind of start while Joel's pulling this up. Thanks, Joel. So I'm really pleased today that RMC is here to talk to you about the plan a little bit, highlight some of the plan. As I've mentioned before in previous discussions about the plan preparation, we're on a very abbreviated schedule for this plan, and it's very data heavy, very data intensive. A lot of staff acknowledgement goes to the folks here at the district, too. Every department participated in some way or another in the development of this plan, and RMC would just sort of acted as the driving force to pull everything together and get the plan together. So, as you know, this is sort of an update to an already existing plan in 2010. So this is just, I don't know, a 5-year recurring cycle, and we're going to talk a little bit about what you're going to see in that plan today and accept public comment. So I just kind of wanted to talk briefly about the reason why we do the Urban Water Management Plan update. It's part of the Urban Water Management Planning Act, which was first enacted in 1983. It's required for the district to get any sort of grants or loans from the Department of Water Resources. Many other funding entities are also looking at urban water management plans as a requirement to get certain grant funds. It's submitted every 5 years on the years 0 and 5. Some folks update it more often than that. It also kind of revisits water supplies for the district and the uses, as well as customer base. And also we look at demand management, sort of conservation measures and other things as well. And today we're going to talk a little bit too about the water shortage contingency planning update as well. I think actually we did an item on that previously as well too. So the public hearing today is just one piece of the public outreach and involvement process. In March, I sent out an initial preparation notice, which was required to all county and water districts and other cities that might be affected by the plan. That's part of the requirements. We also sent out public hearing notices in the newspaper 2 times during this month. That's part of the requirements from the state. And additionally, the public hearing today, which is going to be the hearing on the public draft that was released on May 11th to accept those comments from the public if necessary. And those public comments will be due next Friday. So we'll be receiving comments from the public and trying to address those as necessary. So today, the board's going to accept comments from the public on the draft plan. Staff will then work to respond if necessary to comments received during this hearing or actually during the public comment period, so people can send in written comments. And a final draft of the plan will be developed and released prior to the formal board meeting where we will adopt it next month. I did want to note today that Board President Strange couldn't be here. His wife is accepting an award in Washington, D.C. We did take some time to accept his comments. The majority of those comments are grammatical in nature or just sort of suggested edits to the narrative. So we'll look at those and work to incorporate these comments in a final draft as necessary.
Any other public comment received thus far?
Not yet. You know, I'm awaiting comment on that. I don't, maybe we'll see.
They'll probably line up behind you as
Yeah,
it goes on.
yeah, I'm waiting for the rush. So today we do have Allison Watson and Katie Cole from RMC, and I'm just going to hand over the microphone to Katie Cole, who's been sort of the project manager for this effort, and let her kind of walk through some of the highlights of this presentation. So.
Vice President Davidson, members of the board, it's a pleasure to be here this morning. So as Peter mentioned, I'm just going to walk through some of the updates in the 2015 plan that you'll see, as well as how the district is doing in meeting its 2020 goals for SB 7X7. I'll briefly go over schedule and next steps, and then we can take any questions, comments, and discussion. So one of the updates of the 2015 Urban Water Management Plan are population projections. This graph here shows population on the y-axis and then years on the x-axis. The Urban Water Management Plan requires that water suppliers go out to 2035 with optional planning horizon out to 2040. The district has opted to go out to 2040. Population projections were derived from Department of Finance data. The reason we chose this was it's actually mandated as part of SB 7X7. So in order to be consistent between the two methodologies, we opted to use Department of Finance data here as well. Department of Finance data is county-wide, so we were able to scale that back to just show population projections for the district service area. The population that you see here, just one note, is permanent population only. There is a high percentage in some areas of seasonal population. That is accounted for in the Urban Water Management Plan. We do discuss that. But DWR requires just the permanent population, which is what you'll see here. Another big component of the 2015 Urban Water Management Plan are updated demand projections. There's really two methodologies that go into what you're seeing here. The first is looking at essentially residential, commercial, non-agricultural, and then agricultural demand, recognizing that those two different types of uses can grow very differently. So in order to come up with non-agricultural demand, essentially residential, we use the same methodology that we use for the population growth. So taking a look at Department of Finance population projections and matching demand growth to the population growth. For agricultural demand, we looked at the 2011 Provost and Pritchard study, which essentially takes a land use-based approach to agricultural demands. So combining those two approaches, this is what you'll see here for total district demand. So by 2040, we're looking at about 45,000 acre-feet per year of demand. So taking a step back, looking at where the district is in terms of meeting its by 2020 SB 7X7 goal, there's really two components to this analysis. The first is the urban water use target, which is essentially where water suppliers need to get to on a per person, per use basis by 2020. And then in 2015 interim goal, so making sure that you're taking steps to meet that 2020 goal. So we confirmed that the district's 2020 target is 176 gallons per capita per day. And then the 2015 interim target, which is essentially halfway between a specified baseline GPCD and the 2020 GPCD. So the 2015 interim use target is 198 GPCD. So when we take a look at what the district actually used in 2015, you have absolutely met your goal. You were at 164 GPCD in 2015. So the district is definitely on target to meet their 2020 goal, but conservation, leak repair are going to be critical to making sure that you stay on track and meet that 2020 goal. Another required component in urban water management plans is comparing supplies and demands under a range of hydrologic scenarios. So looking at normal years, single dry, and then a multiple consecutive 3-year dry period. So this table is showing the supply and demand totals district-wide in a single dry year in the future. So basically assuming if a single dry year were to happen in 2030, under demands in 2030 and supply under 2030, what would that look like? So if we take a look district-wide 2040, there's absolutely sufficient supply to meet demands, about 35,000 acre-feet surplus. But as we know, the district has distinct service areas, which essentially means that not all supply can go to meet all demand. So if we drill down a little bit deeper, we can see that there are some areas that could potentially see a shortfall in dry years. These two areas include the McCollum, what we're calling the McCollum subregion, and then the groundwater subregion, which is essentially Wallace. So in a single dry year, we see supply totals in McCollum, for example. As we've seen in the last few years, the Bear Creek water right was curtailed. So the only water that was available to that area was the 200 acre-feet supply from CCWD. So if you project that into the future with demand growth, by 2040, there could be almost up to 40 acre-feet deficit. The district has recognized this in the Urban Water Management Plan and has identified measures to address these shortages. The first is to implement the Water Shortage Contingency Plan, which I'll talk about in a moment. But essentially, these demands that you're seeing here do not include any measures that the district would take to reduce demand as a result of this shortage. So implementing the Water Shortage Contingency Plan would bring those demands down. Additionally, in the McCollum subregion, you could request additional supply from CCWD to meet any deficit. In the Wallace subregion, similar story here, implementing the Water Shortage Contingency Plan to bring demands down, as well as supplementing demand with other surface water. So jumping back to the Water Shortage Contingency Plan, that was a major focus of this 2015 update. The district there was some concern that it was very difficult to implement the Water Shortage Contingency Plan components that the district had, particularly around the governor's order. So what we did is we took a very streamlined approach, combined everything into one plan, so that gives the district flexibility in meeting demands, as well as addressing any outside forces that could result in demand reductions that are not tied to the district's supply. So I'll get into that a little bit here. So the plan itself has 5 stages, ranging from a voluntary rationing stage, so just asking customers to reduce, all the way to an emergency stage, which has the most severe measures in terms of reducing water use. The Urban Water Management Planning Act does require that agencies address a 50% reduction in total supply, so that's why you'll see that stage 5. And these stages here are directly tied to the district's supply. So if the district decides that, or finds that there is, for instance, a 20% reduction in supply, then they would enter a stage 3, a moderate stage, and implement the measures under that stage. There are 2 additional stages or triggers, if you will, that are not on this slide. The first is what we're calling essentially a stage 0, which are ongoing measures that the district always has in place to reduce baseline water use. And then the next is, it's essentially a trigger. And the reason that we incorporated this in the Water Shortage Contingency Plan was to address, as I mentioned, outside forces. So if the state were to come in and say, you know, we say reduce 10%, that would give the district the flexibility to turn to its Water Shortage Contingency Plan and implement certain measures to make sure that that reduction is met. So quickly on schedule, the Urban Water Management Plan is due to the Department of Water Resources by July 1st. Today is our public meeting. Public comments due, that should be June 3rd, so we're going to give 2 additional days, as Peter mentioned, to the end of that week. We'll collect all the comments, create a response to comments matrix so you can see how each comment was addressed, get those in the plan, and then we'll bring it back to you for final adoption on June 22nd. We'll then have a week to upload everything to DWR and get it into them for the July 1st deadline. So I'll take any other questions, comments.
So do you want the board to comment this time, or do you want to open a public hearing and have the public comments, or how should we handle it?
I would, Peter, would you prefer to go straight to questions at this point, and then to, maybe that provides more time if we do have someone arrive to want to make public comment?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I guess, do you want to take the public comments at this point, just in case there's folks that need to get out of here, or?
I don't,
Well, no,
I'm guessing we don't
More of
have,
a presentation. She asked for questions.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's just from the board. Should we
Yeah,
open
oh,
public
okay.
Should we open the public hearing for the board, or do we wait?
well, I'd say let's answer any questions that the board has at this time, and then conduct the public hearing.
Okay.
And I'll let Katie answer most of the questions. I feel comfortable that she.
Is there more to the presentation, or?
This is it, yeah, feel free to
Okay.
ask away.
All right, Bertha?
Yes. I was curious as to, this is an update. What was the most serious issue that you confronted that you had to modify?
Quite honestly, I think demands was a big issue, as we saw, I think, in the 2010 plan, so taking a close look at that. If you take a look at the urban water management plan this year, we actually took 3 different approaches to demand projections. The one I showed you is the one that was ultimately used as the demands throughout the plan. But basically showing, addressing the concerns of demand throughout the service area, and looking at, if we take a land use based approach, what does that look like? If we take, as we did, a Department of Finance kind of population approach, and then a kind of a per connection use approach. And so I think using those 3 different methodologies, approaches, is a good way to address any potential concerns, particularly ones that we would have seen or that we did see in 2010.
Because you indicated land use, that was one of the ones. And so I'm wondering if our general plan, quandary had anything to do with that.
Yeah, absolutely, and we addressed that in this 2015 update. We know that that's been challenged. The new one has not been adopted, and so there was absolutely a question of, well, can we use something that hasn't been adopted? There's, obviously concerns with that. Also concerns with using a plan that's been challenged, so trying to come up with creative ways to get at appropriate demands, and using the information that we have, and the information that a lot of folks feel comfortable with.
And that was one thing, we wanted to make sure that the demand projections were as realistic as we could make them, and not overly, it's a conservative approach, and it's kind of, Katie looked at different scenarios, and we tried to find an area that wasn't, too far on one end, or too much of a reaction to what happened with the economic downturn, or too much of a reaction to what could happen if, everything and then some were to come about. So I feel comfortable with what was ultimately captured here in the document.
Director Mills?
I see a lot of work here on the demand projections and coming up with some numbers and looking and identifying at our specific strengths and shortfalls. But what I'm not seeing here is some of the challenges we may see in conveyance methods, or any suggestions to address conveyance issues, which seems to be our weak link in much of our area, specifically the McCollum and Wallace. You did touch on Wallace and some of the options that we might have there, but I really felt that there should be a little bit of more effort put into addressing our conveyance shortfalls.
You said particularly in the McCollum region.
Well, we also have the same issue along Highway 4 to some degree, but not to the degree that we do at the McCollum.
Yeah, and Director Mills, I certainly understand where you're coming from. It's a very good point. I think we want to make sure we're not going too far into the analysis where it becomes an engineering facilities plan, because that's not really the scope of it. But if there are things that are, obviously something that would have to be addressed as part of that, seems appropriate to call that out.
We're not trying to define projects with this document.
Yeah, no, that's kind of where we don't want to get into that, but because this really is to help us in the next things as we move into particular service areas and do those plans. This is kind of a guide map as we go into that.
Okay,
Director Underhill?
yes, I had page 1.2 you were talking about the district supplies and water use, and one of the things that I'm not getting was, you know, the difference between the Calaveras River and the Stanislaus, because you're talking about the Jenny Lind and Sheep Ranch areas, delivered nearly 3,200 acre feet in 2015, approximately 3,800 connections. Then when you slip to the Stanislaus, it said serving about 6,000 connections, and we had 2,500 acre feet. And so that just didn't make sense to me.
It's, people use less water up the
Right.
hill.
You're not there a lot.
You know, and I
Yeah.
realize that, you know, we have seasonal
Well,
water
it's-
usage.
But it's 43% of seasonal occupants up in Ebbets Pass, where it's 97% occupants in Rancho Calaveras, permanent occupants. I think those are the numbers.
A lot
Close to
larger,
it.
a lot larger lots.
Yeah, and we have larger lots and
Garden.
and gardens and such, so.
Less mountain misery.
We've tracked that data pretty historically for gallons per day of usage, Ebbets Pass. It's actually anything above the.
Right,
49
no, and I
quarters.
understand that, but it just looks so blatant to me, it just, you know, what?
Vice President Davidson, I wonder, Director Underhill, I wonder if that, maybe that's a question for RMC and Peter, would that include the Calaveras, include our irrigation customers as well? It would, I mean, because that's obviously a dramatic difference in usage based on irrigation and municipal accounts, which would be far less than those that are actually growing, you know, agricultural
But
commodities.
I don't believe, what's our ag usage down there? It's 100, under 100 acre foot?
1,500.
1,500, yeah, it's substantially, yeah, it's substantial, yeah.
Okay.
I have a question regarding one of the early slides. Again, it's involving the projection into the future for use. There, the one before, there you go. What's going to account for that huge, I mean, we're talking 4 times the use of water. What's the big, and I know it can't be the amount of people, it can't be population. What?
Ag demand.
Ag
That would be
demand?
the ag demand, yep.
Yeah, and that's a couple of the questions that I had. I mean, there's 2 comments in here regarding ag, and I just want to make sure that we're recognizing it. First is the encroachment of the nut industry in the vineyards. I saw something in here, but I thought it was more related to vineyard type products, and I don't know how specific we have to be, but there is a significant encroachment on Calaveras County up the Highway 26 corridor in regards to nuts. And I don't see that stopping. There's still turning fields over there as we speak. So I don't see that stopping. And while that's going to be primarily, unless they get closer to the river, it's going to be a groundwater demand, which we know is in overdraft, but certainly needs to be represented here as a future potential high water demand. I mean, these guys are making millions and millions of dollars of investment, and if they suffer from failing wells, they're going to be seeking a remedy for that, and that's something that we need to be prepared for.
Okay.
Certainly want to address that. The other issue that I had here was in regards to the comments about the cannabis, and I would just want to make, if this is the document to do it in, our concerns about water quality in the industry. I think that we, perhaps this is just a supply document, we don't need to talk about quality, but I feel that we should be commenting and discussing our concerns about chemicals and some of the byproducts of this industry. At the very least, we should be doing that. So I don't know if we've taken that approach, or just from my scanning through this, I didn't see much of that other than supply-related issues for that potential industry. So I just, those are a couple of the things in relation to ag, and its future demand. But I mean, I certainly see that there is that opportunity to have a high value crops begin to creep into Calvert County.
Vice President Davidson, I think on the marijuana issue, that's a really good point. I think what we should add to the narrative in there is a reference to the Public Policy Institute of California report about marijuana cultivation. It identified 3 primary impacts statewide, and 2 of those are water-related, 1 water supply and 1 water quality. And I think we should just highlight that. And I think the fact that the county is going through its administrative process with an EIR, which will include an analysis of those impacts as well, that would be a place for us to monitor and potentially weigh in on that.
In their EIR?
Yes.
Okay.
This document is a driver to future decisions over the next 5 years or so. The county has identified areas where wells are insufficient or are becoming insufficient. That also is going to have some play in where water needs to be redistributed or used, and specifically in growth. And I'm thinking of Diamond 20, Paloma, there are a number of locations. Should that be part of this document as well to help us to decide in the future that we may need to serve Diamond 20? I know there was some plans of that years ago.
Yeah, no, it's,
But
there's no new ideas.
no, it's not a new idea, but is that something that we need to include in the concept here, or is that more of an engineering concept?
Director Mills, I think the idea that we should be thinking forward about potential surface water supplies for areas that are on potentially unreliable groundwater, that if we saw a loss of wells, that they would need to have some access to surface water. And you know, I think that's something we might want to include, at least in the narrative. I think that is, it's something other agencies in our region are thinking about as they plan for their future water supplies and demands, is to have some backstop supply. So I think that's very much appropriate.
Anything further from the board before I ask about anything else? Just a couple things. In regards to the governor's order, you know, in our case, we were limited in water usage by the governor's order, not by a shortage of supply. And I mean, the language didn't really discuss that as much as, you know, we didn't really have a water shortage in Calaveras County over the last couple of years, or a supply shortage for our customers. We were required to have a shortage. And, I mean, is it appropriate to comment on that, or is it just going to be unacceptable? Because it can be, water shortages can be political. And do we want to address it or not? I'm just asking it openly because, you know, it's just, I don't know whether it's appropriate in this document or not, but it was strictly a political decision. And
Absolutely, and it's a good point, and one that we did include in the water shortage contingency plan. That's that additional trigger I was trying to get at. So if, you know, as you saw, there was no really shortage, but the state said, you know, you're going to need to reduce 13%, 18%, what, you know, whatever. And, you know, your hands are kind of tied thinking, okay, I have this water shortage contingency plan. How do I fit these two together when they seemingly don't fit? And so that's that additional trigger that's in the water shortage contingency plan to take into account those kind of outside forces, if you will.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I appreciate you mentioned this, Vice President Davidson, because this is something we talked about, Joel and Peter and I talked about at the very beginning and with RMC, was we wanted to, you know, that's the frustrating thing. You've got your own water shortage contingency plan that's based on, you know, we design these based on state requirements and everything, and we have these in place. And the triggers are based on local conditions, so, you know, flows and precip within our watersheds. And yet, as we saw, we have, you know, an overriding state mandate with the governor's order that imposes requirements that are disconnected from that, or can be. And so, as you see, you know, that's why we tried to, you know, find a way to use our existing plan and requirements to meet those requirements, and we ended up in a place now where we're at a stage 2.5. So we want to avoid that because it's confusing, and and so this approach was basically the triggers can be both tracks. We've got local conditions, and we've got, if we have an overriding state requirement that comes down, as we did in this situation. That's where. So I think we're in a much better place with this one, and we can be very clear and specific to the public when we trigger that, when the board imposes, goes to, enacts those stages to make clear, okay, this is based on local conditions, or this is based on requirements coming down by the state.
To piggyback with what you're saying, the state in the future then has asked that we provide 3 years of proven reserves in the decision process. Is this something that we need to include here, just a simple statement about that?
Director Mills, that's a moving target, because that 3 years based on this second revised emergency regulation. So I think we'd be better off, instead of trying to catch that as it's a moving target, I think we'd be better off, the path that we have gives us enough room to be able to capture all of that. But I definitely appreciate, there's nothing to say, though, unfortunately, that will be the model going forward. I mean, where we see with that self-certification, which we'll talk about in a little later today, in large part it's based on comments that agencies like us made to try to get those local conditions actually considered in recasting the statewide requirements.
Being required to hold those proven reserves will actually help put us in a better position in terms of future water rights issues or water consumption issues. So the more aggressive we can be with that, the better it's going to be to secure our future here.
Yeah, I think that the general idea, when we captured in our comments, that Joel submitted extensive comments in multiple rounds of that regulation and testified before the state board. And the idea from us, Aqua, and the other local agencies across the state was we really wanted more of the ability to actually use the local conditions as we have in our plans, as we have built, invested and built trust with the public on, so that there is more of that understanding, transparency, and it really is more tailored to the actual conditions on the ground, as opposed to more of a one-size-fits-all approach. So I think you're right. That precedent is important. Hopefully this helps us going forward, and if we see this again, this can be maybe one of the things that is used to model whatever comes out of that.
I do want to acknowledge, I had it marked last night, but I didn't mention it earlier, and I brought it up about the walnuts and almonds, and you do address that in chapter 4, page 10.
But I think that's, and I think that's a really good point, because this isn't speculative. We have actual, tangible evidence of this happening, and particularly what you're talking about, the continuing constraints on groundwater, and now with SIGMA implementation, and the fact that there may be strict controls placed upon how much water can actually be used for those crops in the future and for expanded crops. The access to surface water, I mean, it no doubt will be critically important for, a number of different future planning. So there's no doubt about it.
I think we probably should need to have the same approach. I mean, the walnuts and almonds, they are gonna, that is a trend that we can identify that is coming up here. And we have concerns just like we do about or should have concerns just like we do with the cannabis industry. One of them is having to supply those folks down the road, or perhaps do it now. So maybe we should take the same approach to identifying concerns with each, as opposed to just one than the other. I mean, I think that we need to recognize that there's going to be challenges with opportunities and challenges with either of these things that are the two likely scenarios that are coming to this county agriculturally. And we're talking about 29,000, I believe I saw it here, we had identified 29,000 acres of irrigatable cropland that could be done in Calaveras County. So I think we did a study a few years back where we identified, 35,000, or we did an ag study, maybe it was back during Ed Rich's time, but it was, it's a significant opportunity. The trick is getting it to them.
Yeah.
Exactly, but you're right. One way, I mean, if they come in and relying upon groundwater, and that does not prove to be sustainable, then we're going to have to deal with it one way or the other. And as well, this goes exactly to one of the important reasons why we need to be very much a part of what happens with the groundwater sustainability plan that's ultimately developed for the Eastern San Joaquin groundwater basin, because that does directly affect the future of our county and those potential uses of the land overlying that basin. So.
Anything else from the board? Okay, should we open the public hearing? Okay, at this time, we'll open the public hearing to accept public comment on the district's draft 2015 Urban Water Management Plan update. Is there any public comment today? Thank you all for your participation. No public comment at this time. Okay, we will close the public hearing. And what would you like us to do next? We just, do we have to vote to accept this, or is it just acknowledge that we accept it? I said two things, Mona, you can't shake your head up and down.
Just acknowledge, there's no, you just acknowledge it.
Okay. All right, well, thank you very much. I really appreciate this document. It's very easy to read. It's got some great information, and I look forward to being able to adopt it. So, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll move on to new business. 5A, discussion action regarding amending, restating lease agreement with the Royal Order of the Moose, Ebbets Pass. Good Lord,
See, and it's
my favorite lease.
Good morning, Vice President Davidson, members of the board. This agenda item is to request board approval of a new lease with the Moose, the Royal Order of Moose, that actually operates our facility up at White Pines. That we've had a long-standing relationship with the Moose, an excellent relationship all the way back to 1978. We've had, I believe, 4 or 5 different leases over that time, and a number of amendments to those. The current lease we're at a point now where we're almost to the last 5-year term of the existing lease. And so with that, we were approached by the Moose and asked to, would we consider working with them to come up with a new lease so that they could have certainty that they would, would have continued access to the facility, and primarily so that they could make investments in the facility and improvements to it. Some improvements to the bathroom and some improvements to the back area, to some of the retaining walls and things like that. And to be able to move forward with that, they wanted to have that security that they would have continued access to the facility. Director Underhill and I attended a meeting up there with a number of the members and toured the facility and kind of went through the history and some of our experiences together, and it was incredibly positive. I was really impressed to learn all the things that they do to benefit our community, and the fact that it is such an important part of the community. We've got I think that the number of members of the local community that are actually active in the work of the Moose there and their charitable efforts was really impressive to me, and just some of the things. And we do have Scott McKinney from Moose. Thank you very much, Scott, for being here. He will be sharing some comments with you in a second, and he'll be sharing some of the work that they do, the charitable work that they do. And I think that was really important just for us to understand that. I know Director Underhill was very familiar with that. I wasn't being new to the area, but so my feeling coming out of that was really, let's try to find a way to come up with a lease that would ensure that they would be there and continue to operate this facility and do the good work that they do for a continued period of time. And so what you see here is a lease agreement that was drafted by our council and provided to the Moose, and they have reviewed it, and they're comfortable with it. Just to let you know, we did, before this meeting, last week, I met with President Strange, and he gave me his thoughts on this. He thinks that, he has a very favorable impression of our dealings with the Moose there in this lease. But his one comment was that he thought maybe the initial term of the lease was longer than it should be. The way this is drafted, it would be a 20-year initial lease, followed by a 10-year term after that if we if the parties opted to extend it, that could kick in. And so his suggestion was that we look at a shorter term than 20 years for this lease. And I've spent quite a bit of time, I've kind of wrestled with this, going back and forth. I can see, how that obviously, that is a lengthy period of time. But when I put a thought into this, to me, it makes sense that, we have a relationship since '78, and, from my perspective, and I believe, this is the perspective of the agency, is that, I think we would like to see nothing more than the Moose to stay in there and continue to do the good work that they do. And, we don't have essentially an option B here that's more favorable to us. We're not looking to, to try to find someone else to come in and operate this. If they weren't there, like, it might very well, not, just sit empty. So,
Or become surplus property.
well, potentially, yeah. And so, so I, from staff, from my perspective, I am comfortable with the 20 years. I think we've got plenty of protection within the lease. As you'll notice, the rent has gone up. It's gone up to $350 a year. It's still relatively a modest rental price, but it is consistent with the other leases that we have with the other organizations that provide public services up there nonprofits that we are in leases with. And so we wanted to make that consistent. As well, we have a very robust indemnity provision to protect us in the event anything happens, anyone gets hurt or any property is damaged, and so that's good, and I'm very, very comfortable with that language. And as well, we have a very robust insurance provision to back that up. And as you'll notice, we have even in addition to the amount of the rental payment, we actually had a substantial increase in the amount of the insurance requirements, and primarily for the alcohol, the liquor-related protection there. And so that's something that, again, and I should mention that this was not only with this review by council, but we also had Aqua GAPIA, as we mentioned before, our insurer, look at this language, and this is their recommended language on the insurance provisions as well. So all of that's been incorporated.
Let me ask you a question about that. Now,
Yes.
You're talking about our insurance agent. So we insure this building in addition to their insurance?
We do have this
this
listed on
property,
our
I should
property
say.
insurance schedule. We do, but this would be, particularly in the event of any personal injury or property damage that the Moose would be responsible for. Their insurance would be the primary insurance to cover that, and ours would be a secondary. So this is. And that's kind of one of the services Aqua JPIA provides is to provide language that we can incorporate in our contract. So it's basically that risk transfer is kind of one of the services they provide, and we're able to shift some of the risk to our lessee through this language, through the indemnity provision, and then in the insurance language to back that up. So we know that we have adequate protection under those provisions. So this is a substantial improvement from what we have in the existing lease as of today. So if we allowed the existing lease to continue and the Moose asked to extend it for another 5 years beyond this year, we would have less coverage under the provisions of that, less protection than we have under this. So I think this was a very, very positive thing that we're able to include that as well. And likewise, just to be clear, the same provisions apply in the fact that, they are a tenant, they have to seek our approval to do modifications to the facilities, anything like that. We have a lot of oversight of what happens. We're not going to, walk away step back and let everything, not pay any attention to what's happening there for 20 years. That's not the approach at all. I think it's really behooves us to have a really strong, close relationship with them. Again, I think, from my perspective, I think our best outcome is to have continue our long relationship with them. One last thing that I think is really helpful in having them there is to physically have a presence up there. It is a remote area. We have important facilities there. It's our source water supply for some of our communities, and to have them there to be able to be eyes and ears on the premise, I think is a good thing.
Okay. Director Underhill.
Yes, okay. I was looking, of course, over my agenda packet, and when I saw Moose Lodge, as a matter of fact, I came up with an acronym that describes what I feel about the Moose Lodge, and that would be CSP. C would be community, the S would be stability, and the P would be pride. Because, as we say, the Moose have been there since 1978, which is 38 years. And they've been there, and they've represented Ebbets Pass, and talk about community. Their calendar is, every day there is something on their calendar in which they give back to the Ebbets Pass community. I mean, name all the holidays, Christmas, Thanksgiving, Easter, they have the Easter egg hunt. You know, in addition to all the rest of the things that they do, it is just amazing. And again, the stability. After all this time, Mona has had countless calls, you know, can the Moose do something about, you know, their property? Is there anything that we need to do? You're most willing to keep the property up, and I hope everyone has seen what the Moose Lodge looks like. They make sure that the parking lot is, you know,
Free of any director's cars.
we have,
I got kicked out of there one time for parking on it, so.
Do you have to recuse yourself?
I don't know, I have the time frame. Well, listen, I think we can get through this, hopefully in a shorter period of time than we did with our urban water management plan, which I believe deserves a lot more attention than this. So perhaps we can have
You bet.
our friend from the Moose Lodge come up, and then we'll have our director's comment after that and move along.
Thank you, Vice President Davidson. My name is Scott McKinney. I've been a member of the Moose since '94. Retired fire captain with CAL FIRE. I'm also on the board of directors for Evans Pass Fire, so I'm involved in the community up there. Like Director Underhill said, we do a lot for the community. We take pride in what we have up there. The facility needs a little bit more maintenance, some better upkeep, and it's tough to convince people to volunteer their time and efforts and to donate money if, you know, they're not sure we're gonna be around. So that's why we've, you know, requested that you revisit the lease, and, you know, that's why I'm here today. You know, we do a lot for the community, pre-Thanksgiving dinner every year for the public. I believe it was Thanksgiving of 2010. We had some very inclement weather up there, a lot of snow, power out, not a lot of places open, so we went around and Trees Inc., PG&E, and whatever, you know, utility company was up there, invited them for a free dinner. You know, we take care of the community. Christmas party for kids every year with Santa Claus. Easter party where we raffle bicycles for boys and girls and do the Easter egg hunt. We have an annual fundraiser we do where we raise money for Hospice of the Sierra, which entails a golf tournament and a dinner. A lot of raffle prizes and stuff, and but we give back to the community, scholarships, you know, to the high school kids. Not only Bret Hart and Calveras, but Mountain Oaks. Backpacks, school supplies for the local, you know, any school that requests it, we're there for them. Kids that need financial help to get to science camp, we'll sponsor them. And we have another program up there that we took on when the local art chapter left, and that is supplying durable medical equipment to those that need it. Walkers, crutches, wheelchairs, shower chairs, porta potties, at no charge. We loan it out and just ask that when they're done, bring it back, and we maintain it, clean it, and get it ready for the next person that needs it. You know, we have volunteers that cook up there, that do the dinners, that put on these functions. We've also been involved with different crews that help out. We cook for the Logging Museum, for the Logging Jamboree, the GABA Car Show, the Big Trees Family Day. Up there, we've cooked for that. We've cooked for other fundraisers, the Day for Trade, Jarnigan up there that day that raised over $100,000. So we do quite a bit, and we'd like to continue to do that. But we're volunteers, and like I said, in order to convince people to donate their time and effort, because every time at our meetings when it's brought up that, you know, we need to invest some money and time into, you know, this maintenance, the comment comes up, well, are we gonna be there? All we have is a 5-year lease, you know? Is it worth the time and, you know, my money, donating my money to do this? And, you know, with a longer lease, it makes it easier, you know, to take pride and keep the place looking nice. And
All right,
we appreciate your helping us.
okay, thank you. Does the board have any comments? I have a couple, but go ahead.
I do.
Scott?
I know General Manager Egerton did indicate that we do carry all the insurance on that. I'm just concerned, I do read leases quite often, and paragraph 9 does address the different insurances that they're carrying, that the Moose are carrying. And by the way, I'm in total agreement of a 20-year lease. That provides security for us. We're not going to get a better use of that building, and the Moose is a great respect in our community. Many charitable contributions. Read about them all the time, and I'm certainly in support of a 20-year lease. I don't think that's a concern at all. The way it reads, 9C, casualty, and I'm thinking that that's our property insurance, that they're required, that the Moose are required to carry property insurance on the buildings. There's no reference to property or buildings in that section of the lease, and I'm thinking that's what casualty means. Definitely got general liability, alcohol liability, auto liability, workers' comp. Those are all covered very, very nicely in there, but I think the underlying section of 9C should be property and casualty in some reference to the building is insured at their cost.
And Director Edelman, that's a great point. I think it is, it references premises, says that the insurance in the, what is it,
At the value of
equal to the value of the premises,
Right,
which is a
right.
capitalized term. So
Uh-huh.
on the first page, under one of the recitals, it says,
Well, that's the only clue that it involved, building or property insurance. But building or property insurance is not the same as casualty. When you talk about property and casualty, you're talking about property and liability coverage.
Okay.
Casualty, reference of casualty insurance is more reference to liability insurance than property. I just think property, the word property should be.
Okay.
We can add that. I think this is the language that was given us by Aqua, but we
Okay.
can leave their language and
It's
adjust
just
it.
more clear.
Yeah, that's fine.
The other thing, property taxes, I do read section 22, taxes assessments, is that what it's a reference to, or is there another assessment that might come about? Who pays property taxes on that facility?
I'm sorry, I didn't catch that. provision.
Paragraph 22 deals with the lessee understands that it is possible that a possessory interest tax may be levied. Are they talking about a
Yeah, well, we don't pay property taxes because we're a
Oh.
public agency.
Okay, and
So,
we-
but there is
so
a
they're not gonna-
potential that if the county or somebody wants to say, well, because, we're leasing it, there's some type of tax. What we're saying is if that comes up, it would fall upon them. It has, but
Okay.
if it does, yeah. So there's no property tax because we don't pay property
Good to know.
taxes.
That's all I got, and I'm in total agreement of 20 years.
And Director Edelman, so to be clear, on that insurance provision 9C, you'd prefer that we recommend that we change casualty to property insurance?
Yeah, and maybe buildings on premises. I mean, just some assurance that the property
add
we
that.
own there is being covered, and it says at full value of premises, that's, I don't know, had 100% of value, that's, I think it's perfect, but
Okay,
just the word property or building, I think would be clearer if it was in.
okay.
Because
I'm
all
thinking
it
we add-
says
we-
is market
Yeah.
value.
And I'm just thinking
And
we
that's-
strike casualty and put in property insurance,
Can
and the
it-
defined term premises cover says building at the very beginning of the.
And Bertha
agreement,
just
so-
made a great
Okay.
point too. Let me look at that, because when you insure someone to market value, you're insuring something at actual cash value, which is not at replacement cost value. When you got an old building and it comes time to replace, and all you're getting from if that's all that it required, that may be all that they're carrying is equal to market value. That usually means the depreciated amount, and you don't want that. You want with replacement cost coverage, and those words should be in C as well.
Yeah, because at $350 per month, that building's worthless.
Right.
The-
Yeah.
So it would be.
It would have a negative value if it, and the depreciation on an old building, and you might even require another thing that should be in there with code upgrade coverage, especially on an older building. And if they're not required to carry those sorts of things, it comes time and you do have a casualty loss, and you're not able to complete repairs if you're insured. If the deductible is fine, it's something that that any insured could, you know, withhold. You pick your own deductible, and that's your only out-of-pocket. If you don't have code coverage and replacement cost coverage, when it does come time for a disaster, you're in trouble.
So would it be appropriate to add replacement cost in front of value? So it's a property insurance in an amount equal to the replacement cost value of the premises is reasonably determined by lesser
Right,
insurance
or
property.
carry replacement cost coverage, I think would be more specific, I mean, and code upgrade coverage.
Code
Those
upgrade,
are,
I think is important.
those are two, on any older building, any building that's, and if they've been in it since the seventies, it's probably was built, what, 50s, 60s, you know, sometime before that. Any building that's below or over 20, 25 years old, especially in the snowpack, I mean, maybe even the, I mean, that is one code upgrade, is this the ability
Snow
of the
load.
roof to carry the load. And that has changed over the years, especially since the seventies.
Okay, great. I'll work with council to make that change. and-
Code coverage and,
Yeah,
and
code upgrade and
cost coverage.
replacement cost value.
And I think they probably already have it. Most policies do have that anyway. It's, I bet you already have, your policy already includes those things, but it would behoove us to include those in our requirements.
And I would,
Yeah, we appreciate your input, Scott, because
when we make this change, you might want to take this back, talk with JPA at your
Yeah.
board meeting and say, this should be your recommended change, because
And it
this
should.
really is a good improvement, and they should be using this for
Right,
everybody.
right.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Just a point for record here, has there ever been any discussion or negotiation about outright purchase of the property from the move, for the move?
Yes, we went
About how
through
long
that.
ago?
Yeah, that was about,
Every single time.
You've been here long enough to know that.
uh-huh,
I have my own comments on it.
And I'm sure there's reasons why it was rejected and
Well,
with each one of those decisions.
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, in part because we have the facility just past the Moose Lodge, you know, we have our facility there, and because of the reservoir. I think we want to have probably a little more say in the ability to check in once in a while, as opposed to carving out an island within that of private property.
I just wanted it as a matter
it's
of
good.
record. So
I think
if somebody comes
that's
up-
less the case than the fact that the original lease basically has tied us into this long-term agreement forever. I believe if we had the old lease in front of us, we would see that that 5-year lease, I think there was only one possible change, and that was a slight uptick in rent. That they had that lease in perpetuity, which was a terrible decision by the board back in the day. I have nothing, I think the Moose do a great job there and everywhere else. You know, I'm not making comments about their abilities, but this was one of those poor decisions that a previous board made 20-some years ago out of the kindness of their heart. And now, it's certainly not, because of the way they operate there, it's not an impediment to us, but it is not the sort of business that we would enter into today. You know, or I wouldn't do it today. But I remember historically, the lease was so restrictive on their ability to stay there forever, you know, for $1 a year, and then it would go up maybe another $1 or something ridiculous like that. That's what prohibited, why would they buy it? You
I
know?
just wanted it.
And I honestly think, and even us, the logical solution for us,
Don't challenge
everyone always talks about surplus properties, but, this is a property that actually has, monetary value.
Oh,
that
absolutely.
Without the lease, we would declare surplus. But because we have this long-term lease with them, and again, we don't have the old document in front of us, but I believe people will agree with me, it was restrictive on our ability to do anything. So, I support these changes. I think it is important that somehow they, because I'm doubting that they're ADA compliant. That's off the record. But, I'd like to see them make the modifications to make it a compliant facility, and I think that this probably will help them along those lines.
Yeah, and they brought that up at the meeting, the Moose Lodge did, because they understand what has to be done as far as the restrooms are concerned.
I just wonder, and that's what brings, some of the notes I've taken on this, first of all, was, are they ADA compliant, which I know they're not. But what is our requirement as a district, since, as the landlord, in relation to that?
Well, and I think that this lease actually speaks directly to that issue.
I saw that it said something about bathrooms, but but, you know.
I mean,
public
because obviously
facilities.
that's
I'm just
when-
wondering
Yeah.
what our legal obligation is for that.
The lease, I think, requires them to make the facilities compliant, so if there were to be a claim made against
With the
us.
law. I mean,
Yeah.
it says with the
Yeah,
law, so.
and then if there were to be a claim and we were to be brought in, it would fall upon them to take care of it. We're hoping that doesn't happen.
Paragraph 24.
But yeah, and it's our understanding that they were gonna make some upgrades to the facility to make it compliant.
Have they, I'm just curious, have they done a CASP inspection?
That's addressed in provision 4, which says that to our knowledge, that has not been performed, and that they are accepting the premise as is, and they do assume all responsibility if something has to be addressed. I mean, obviously, they'd have to notify us of any improvements that are made, like they've done with what they want to do now, including some of those improvements in the bathroom to make it accessible.
Well, I'm just as a word of advice, it's in their best interest to get a CASP inspection. If you're not familiar with that, you know, talk to me after the meeting or something, but, because that will limit your liability if somebody does come in there, and as long as you have a work plan that's from a registered CASP inspector, you can begin to make your modifications and do the improvements and limit yourself from liability for not being in compliance. So it's very important that you, if you haven't done that, that you guys do that. And I don't know if we should be making that requirement in this lease or not.
The lease specifically calls out that to the lessor's knowledge, to our knowledge, that it has not been done. Why is it even brought up? Why is?
To notify them that we're leasing them a premises that may or may not be accessible.
This is exactly what we had our attorneys draft the lease, so I
It's on paragraph
and I
4.
know that they're very experienced in this area, so I feel comfortable
That's
with the
to
language we have.
notify them that
Okay.
they are well aware that it's not, you know, we're not making any representations about accessibility.
Okay. Yeah, that's an important, I'm glad to see that in there. I think it's important, and I think, you know, maybe a little, I'd like to know on all of our properties, what our responsibility is on our leased properties, in regards to that, so.
And
just
you
to-
can look at it as part of your committee,
Yeah.
right?
I suppose so.
Yeah, let us know what you find.
I already think I know. But, okay,
Okay.
is there anything else on this, item?
Oh. Any public, no?
Well, we need a,
Yeah,
this is an
make a
action item, we
motion.
need a motion. I make,
Yeah.
I was gonna ask,
oh, yes, go ahead. We'll wait.
I make a motion that we grant approving the amended and restated lease between CCWD and the Loyal Order of Moose, Evans Lodge number 1123.
okay, we have a motion by Director Underhill, is there a second?
I'll second it.
A second by Director Rademan. Any public comment on this item? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Okay, moving on, item 5B, discussion action regarding rescinding ordinance 2015-03, stage 2.5 mandatory water conservation measures. Joel Metzler. Is Joel around? Oh, there he is. I was looking back there.
He left.
Good morning, Vice President Davidson and members of the board. I'm very pleased to recommend today that we rescind the water conservation measures that we've been under for quite some time now. And today I'm going to walk you through a little bit of history of how we got here. I'm then going to walk through the changes the state board made to the emergency regulation, which allows us to make this change. And then finally, I'm going to talk about the governor's executive order and the subsequent permanent regulations that the state board has imposed on all Californians, and then what the next steps are. So a little bit of history, just to look back over the last few years. We first had a voluntary request from the governor for 20%, and we did implement some water conservation standards, which I'll talk about on the next slide. The next thing the governor did when the drought worsened is he issued an executive order requiring a mandatory 25% cutback statewide, which was unprecedented in the state. That led to even more stringent water conservation measures that we put in place. And then finally, the state board on May 5th approved a regulation that laid out a plan to achieve the governor's mandate, which led us to put stringent water conservation measures into effect. And we did incredibly well during this time. We were one of the leading conservers in the state and got statewide recognition by Aqua for our efforts. So what we did was we put stage 3 into effect first, asking for voluntary 20%. That led to an 18% reduction from our customers, which is impressive when it's a voluntary measure. After the governor mandated 25%, we put stage 3.5 into effect. First, we were given a mandatory 32% reduction standard. After working with the state board over about a month of very intense staff work, we were able to get that reduced down to 16%, which was a huge accomplishment for us. That series of measures resulted in a 30% reduction during the time it was in effect, which was incredibly high, well above what the state was asking us to do. And so in light of that, we came before the board and asked to reduce the conservation measures down to a stage 2.5 level. And so that resulted in 22% reduction, which is really through today. That's what we're sitting at right now. And we had our conservation standard reduced from 16 to 13 based on a climate adjustment, which takes into account the different climates throughout the state. That gave us a 3% decrease. And then really right after they did the climate adjustment, the governor came out with an executive order, and the state board completely changed the ballgame for us just recently. And that's what's leading to where we are today. Yes?
And in that last slide, I think it was, should be 2015 and stage 2.5 October 2015.
You're correct.
Okay.
That is 15 is when that went into effect. Just to give you a visual representation of our water use, this is water production. Water production is what is produced at the plants. In 2013, we had really peak water use. When you look back over our history, that was about the most water we ever used. And then looking at the blue line, you see 2014, 15, and then 16 is the purple line, which is where we are now. That just shows how dramatic the reduction in water use has been over these years during the drought period. So the state board had, in response to the governor's executive order, which was just released, they have been asking for comments first. How are we going to change the water conservation regulations? And the reason why they asked us for comments was because after 4 years of drought, we had a significantly different weather pattern. We had really near normal and above normal conditions in many parts of the state. And so in response to that, the state board asked for water suppliers and other organizations and stakeholders to come forward and make comments on how they should respond to this improved water supply condition. And so we submitted written comments. I went down to the state board and submitted oral comments. And what we really expressed to the state board was we're looking for the ability to have local control back based specifically on our water supplies, which is customized to our area, as opposed to a arbitrary one-size-fits-all standard, which is based on how much water you used in 3 months in the summer of 2014 per person per household, which really didn't fit everyone very well and really didn't reflect our supply conditions in Calaveras County. And so we expressed that we'd like to rely on our water supply data and our urban water management plan and our water shortage contingency plan. And I'm really pleased to say that the state board was receptive to those comments, and they really did integrate those comments into the regulation that they've just passed. So what it does is it replaces the state-developed conservation standards, again, based on residential gallons per capita day. It allows us to develop local supply and demand self-certification, which we send in. The state will take a look at those and make sure that they agree with our methodology. What we're looking at is, first of all, our demand, which is based on 2013 and 2014 demand levels. We take those 2 years, how much water we produce, we average them. That's the demand that we're projecting out for the next 3 years. Then we look at the next 3 years, and we basically replicate the supply conditions in 2013 through 2015, and we pretend like that's going to happen again. So we're looking at 3 more consecutive dry years. Based on the demand that we've calculated and the supply, we can self-certify to the state whether we do or don't have enough supply to meet that demand. One thing that I just want to make really clear is we've looked at this closely and we do have enough supply. In fact, we have more than enough supply to meet our demands. And we are going to submit all of this data to the state, but until the state looks at it and says, yes, you have the stamp of approval, that's when it becomes official. So we just want to make sure there is that one more step in this process. If we did not submit anything to the state and just ignored this whole thing, we would keep our existing conservation standard of 13%. So there may be some suppliers that just decide not to submit this new data. It's in our best interest to submit this because it will bring us back into our actual conservation standard based on our supply, which is 0% conservation. So using the guidelines that the state board released, we've carefully calculated our supplies and demands. Based on those guidelines, we come up with a 0 conservation standard. And that's the data we'll be submitting to the state. And so in light of this, staff is recommending to your board that we rescind stage 2.5 water conservation measures and go to 0% conservation standard. However, one thing I want to be really clear on is this is not abandoning water conservation, water efficiency. We're still every bit as committed to educating our customers, working with our customers, about how to make the best use of this valuable resource that we have in this county. And so we're going to continue speaking to the community. We're going to continue offering water conservation supplies. It's just simply not going to be at the same level that took most of my time up over the last couple years to achieve these water conservation achievements. Another thing to keep in mind is even with not as much effort on water conservation, many people have made permanent changes. They've taken out their lawns. They've shrunk the size of their gardens. Maybe some trees have died. This type of use is not just going to come back. We're not going to see 2013 water use levels immediately. And so I expect, even at a 0 conservation standard, we will still see fairly significant conservation over the years to come. And it may take several years for people to start using more water. And we may never see that same water use again without more growth, because people really have changed their habits. Another thing that I think is going to impact this is that Governor Brown, he said in his executive order, the quote is up there, he wants to make conservation a California way of life. And I really think that the state is very committed to this, and we're committed to being part of that conversation. And so with the state trying to make conservation a California way of life, we're going to see permanent regulations developed over the next year, which are going to affect all Californians, going to affect our customers. And let me just tell you what has already been put in place. The governor's executive order has mandated that a certain list will already be put in place. The state board has come and said that these are going to be permanent regulations. And so no matter what standard we have, these would always be in place per the state direction. So we can't irrigate ornamental turf on public street medians, but they do want to keep trees and other vegetation alive in those street medians. No more turf in the state is going to be allowed in street medians. Washing sidewalks and driveways down with potable water is no longer going to be allowed. Allowing runoff when irrigating, using hoses with no shutoff nozzles to wash cars, and running decorative water features that do not recirculate water. There are 2 items in red there. I highlighted those because those are not currently part of our water shortage contingency plan. However, we are still updating that as part of what Peter and RMC brought to you. We're going to add these in because if the state's making them permanent, we certainly want them to be an ongoing permanent conservation standard. These are continued things that are now prohibited statewide: irrigating within 48 hours of measurable rain, irrigating outside of newly constructed homes and buildings not in accordance with emergency regulations or other requirements established in the California Building Standards Code. That's all permanent. We're going to add that one in red to our water shortage contingency plan as well. And then other changes, the monthly reports that I've been submitting to the state, which show our water production, show our residential gallons per capita day, which are used by the state to determine how well we're doing with our conservation, those are going to continue permanently. We never used to have to report to the state monthly, but we now have to continue reporting to them. So that's now permanent. Also, HOAs are not going to be allowed to impede or impair water conservation choices by homeowners, so they can't say you must keep a green lawn. That won't be allowed. And hotels and restaurants have been told, don't serve water unless it's requested in the restaurants, and don't wash linens and towels unless the person asks you to. That's now been lifted. That's no longer a statewide mandate. So the permanent conservation framework, this is kind of replacing the 20 by 2020, which we've been shooting for. In fact, the Urban Water Management Plan laid out how we've already met and exceeded our 20 by 20 goals. However, we need to continue to stay diligent with that. This new permanent conservation framework is going to add to that, and we don't know exactly what that's going to be. It will be developed over the next year, and CCWD wants to be very involved in that. So by January 2017, there's going to be a proposal that's been done. The governor has directed DWR and the state board to work with stakeholders, and we are a stakeholder. And so I know that Dave and I have talked about being very involved in this. I've already told the state in comments how eager we are to make sure that the local foothills is represented in these permanent conservation regulations. And another thing that's going to be key is bringing John Mills on board for more work. There's no one who's more of an expert on these things and working with the state to represent our interests than him, and we expect he's going to be very involved in this process of developing policy. In the development of these permanent regs, there are 4 things that the governor laid out in his executive order. One was indoor residential per capita water use, so what you use inside, outdoor irrigation, commercial, industrial, and institutional water use, and then finally I want to highlight water lost through leaks was one of his 4 main priorities for this. That's something that we are already addressing in our service areas with our capital R&R program. And so I'm really proud to say that we're ahead of the game on this. When we recognize that we have water loss, we have passed rates to support a program that can help us replace things like Reach 3A, which is one of the lines that's the oldest and is losing the most water. And so the state is moving in that direction, and I think they're going to be very pleased to see that we're already working on these things. So what are the next steps? We've developed the water shortage contingency plan. That's going to come before your board next month for final approval. I'm very, very proud that we've developed something that is going to be flexible enough to respond to anything the state puts our way or a local supply condition. Whether it's an artificial or a real supply shortage, we can address that with this plan. It's going to be very important that we have that flexibility, because even though we're in a very good position now, there may be more drought to come. We really don't know, and we have to be ready for it. We have to plan diligently in order to make sure that we can respond to anything. And so we'll keep you updated with what the state does, and we'll make sure that we implement the right stage of that plan. Based on these current conditions, we would be at a stage 0. That would simply be all of these ongoing water conservation, water waste prohibitions. Just don't use water in a way that is just grossly wasteful. Let's be efficient with it. And then if conditions change, if the state board regulations change, we can move up to a 1, voluntary, or a 2, 3, 4, 5, depending on the supply condition. But if I could just stress one thing, we've always had water supply for our customers throughout this entire drought. And that speaks to those who came before us really planning well and putting the infrastructure into place to store water and capture water and provide a really bright future for this county. And so I'm just so pleased that the state has allowed us to actually implement a conservation standard that's truly based on our supply, instead of a one-size-fits-all statewide mandatory water conservation set of standards. So that's my overview. I'm happy to take any questions that you have, and please ask away.
My question would be to all local water suppliers are going to be required to submit the data then, or is this just the 3,000 threshold?
Only the urban water suppliers, and so not the smaller agencies that will not be required. There'll be a one-time report for them to the state just once a year.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, so the action here is to rescind,
Yeah, I got a comment.
okay.
Just a general comment. Water use in this state, I think it's been well known that 50% of our water used in California goes for environmental fish flow purposes. Approximately 40% goes for ag, and 10% goes for urban residential water supplies. And it just seems ridiculous the way we have decided to conserve over the last few years. And I really do hope that some thought goes into asking the federal government that's in charge of those fish flows and environmental and use of that water and the release of it, that 50% of it is, it's a lot easier to target conservation in that level than trying to change the behavior of billions of people in the state. And I do think that now that behaviors have changed, I would really, really hope to see in the future of conservation go to a different pot of water. That 50% needs to be targeted. There's actually very good evidence that a lot of that water is being wasted, and the program and the federal programs that were set up, are currently set up, probably are not accurate and not doing doing justice to this state.
I can speak to that. I spoke to the state, before the State Water Board on that very issue regarding the operation of New Melones for the remainder of the year, and they did hear us. And so what's happening is that fish flow and pulse flow requirements doesn't simply mean that water, when it gets to Vernalis, just goes into the delta, it's gone. And that the use is now the ability to pick it up and take it to San Luis or Westlands or wherever that they feel that it's needed to be used. So it's now having conjunctive uses thought into the process rather than simply just flows to flow to the ocean. So that's a very dramatic change in the stance of the state board regarding how water is used, specifically on the Stanislaus.
I don't even think that's the biggest issue the big issue is they're supposed to be releasing this for temperature. And because they're not retaining enough water, they can't meet the temperature requirement, so they are wasting the water when they send it down the river. We're certainly not getting the benefit that they say, and it is astounding that in a state that spends so much time, as Director Radaman said, on domestic use of water, the only reason that they do that first is because they're the easiest people to force into compliance. Ag and environmental interests are much more difficult to force into compliance, so they put the burden on consumers and residents. And I agree with Director Radaman, it's ridiculous, but if nothing irritates me more than to see them continually to release water out of Maloney's for cold water requirements, when they're not storing enough water in there for cold water requirements.
That's correct.
I mean, it is ridiculous that people that we trust to run the state can't figure this out.
You're preaching to the choir.
No,
Well, with that, I'll make a motion that we adopt this resolution rescinding CCWD's ordinance 2015-16, stage 2.5 mandatory conservation measures that were adopted October 14th, 2015.
I would second the motion.
Now, I just have, we have a motion and a second, I have one comment. Now, the only time I get calls about this is about people filling their pools up. And it's not mentioned in the stage 2.5 requirements, but people are allowed to fill their pools, even from, if they're empty, certainly they can refill them.
Yes, that's allowed under the current 2.5, and it'll certainly be allowed under 0%, yeah. No
Okay,
problem.
because honestly, that's the only phone calls I get in regards to water conservation. I think
Yeah,
the rest of them were pretty
And the
straightforward.
homeowners associations will be extremely happy to hear that.
No. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any public comment on this item? Okay, seeing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Okay, we'll move on to 5C, which seems to me it should have been on the consent agenda. Discussion action regarding ballot for Calaveras LAFCO Independent Special District Representatives.
We only picked one, we should have picked two.
Yes, Mr. Vice President, members of the board, there's an opportunity to select two. And obviously, Director Radaman is one that's obviously the recommendation is to vote for him, but
I thought we were
there's
just
also for
nominating
others.
somebody.
There's a list of others, and I just noted that the one individual who has attended our meetings a number of times, and we're obviously work very closely with on the T-stand, Joe Fontana, Murphy Sanitary District, is on the list.
Spelling.
Is there a recommendation?
Oh, yeah, and unfortunately, this came from
Ratterman.
LAFCO, the spelling.
2 pages later.
Do we,
I gave them how to
so
spell it.
we can handle this by selecting a slate and then getting a second, or do we have to do them one at a time?
No, I would do them together, just do the two.
Okay, is there any recommendation for Tony Terrell?
Yes, he's served on it, he's currently on the board.
I'm just asking if there's a recommendation.
Yes, I would recommend.
Okay, is there a second to Tony Terrell?
I'll go second.
Oh, God, you guys. Okay, we have a motion and a second for Tony Terrell to add into the slate.
With Scott.
No, I'm going to take them one at a time, and,
Okay.
I mean, unless there's another way that we can do this.
Just ask for a motion. And you got a motion and a second. You don't have to go down down the list. You got a motion and a second.
Well, I don't want to, I'm not voting for Tony Terrell, so what do you want to do?
But you got a motion and a second from your board that,
For those two?
for him to add him to the slate. If he gets added to the slate, you can't add a third.
Right, okay. All right, so then, in regards to Tony Terrell, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
I'm opposed. Okay, so then, are there any other recommendations?
So we're done.
No?
It's three to-
I have to vote for you.
Oh.
A
Well, I'm
second?
more, oh, okay.
You have a
I'll
second?
second.
You have a second?
Okay.
Deputy Director, no, thank you.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second to elect Scott Radaman to LAFCO. I should open this to public comment. Is there any public comment on either of these? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, so we're gonna,
So we're through now.
so we're, yeah. Okay. 5D. Review and acceptance of the FY fiscal year 2015-16 third quarter investment report. Jeffrey Meyer.
Good morning, Mr. Vice President, members of the board. You've got me for two items here. The first one is a quarterly investment report, and then we'll talk about budgets.
You know what? We're gonna take a 5-minute break while you get your stuff put up there.
That sounds good. I was wondering if you'd like to do that,
Okay.
because I know how exciting my budget presentations are.
Hey, but it's kind of like work after lunch. It just does, it's not as productive if we take a break. Okay, we'll come back into order. Jeffrey Meyer?
Thank you, Mr. Vice President, members of the board. The item before you is to review and accept the district's quarterly cash and investment report for the period ending March 31st, 2016. This item has been to the Finance Committee for review and questions, and they recommended that it be forwarded to the full board for your review. This is a little old. It's the end of March as far as the report is concerned. We're already towards the end of May. So some of the comments that were made here regarding what was going on in the economy, I'll kind of bypass. We all know that things are still kind of touch and go as far as inflation is concerned. There's not a whole lot of inflation out there. We do anticipate the feds are going to look at raising rates again on their end. And so we're going to see a slight increase moving forward. The unfortunate part is the markets have already pretty much built in that slight increase, so we're not seeing a whole lot of yields available to us, whether it's in CDRs, CDs, medium-term notes, the municipal bonds or such. So it's really been a challenge to try to get yields out of our investments. But remember, yield is the last thing in what we're looking at investments. Security, liquidity, and then yield. In the first quarter, you can see on that page 1, we had an increase in our cash and investments about $1.9 million. That's mostly due in part to our first installment of property tax revenues, which was about $2.2 million. I just found out this morning we're going to get our second installment in, and when I'm looking at those and adding it into the first installment, we're about 96% of budget, which is very good because our supplemental receipts that we have in August are usually about 5.5% of the total distribution. So we're on track. We're actually going to be a little bit over our budget projections in our total property tax receipts for this year. There are a few things to take note. We are still rather short in our investment guidelines and their investment instruments. As far as days out, our goal is to try to do 2 to 3 years as the balance. There's just nothing out there to take the risk to invest 2 to 3 years to get 1.1% or 1.4%, somewhere in there. So we're still staying short. LAIF, though, has proved to be a very good alternative. We're in the mid-50s now, 55-plus basis points, which is fantastic. It's almost double than it was a little over a year ago. We're not getting very good rates on CDARS, so we're kind of shifting our money into LAIF at this point. Plus, we have to stay liquid because we have some significant CIP projects. The Reach 3A, the big trees are going on right now, so there's going to be a lot of outflow of cash to maintain those projects and keeping them moving along. We did receive another distribution from the defaulted Lehman Brothers bond in March. That's our 9th distribution to date, bringing our total amount received to $545,000, which is about 39% of our original investment.
What's the outlook on that?
We're winding down now. This last distribution was only $9,800. So we're probably down to the last. They usually have 2 a year. But we're at about 39%, which is a lot better than what we were offered back early on, between 18 and 22%.
Yeah.
The forecast moving forward is more of a low rates. The 10-year treasuries are trading, I think it was 186 today, 187. It's really not that great. LAIF is continuing to review whether or not they're going to create what they call a LAIF 2, which is more of a medium-term investment that will require you to maintain your funds in a longer time frame, which will provide us a greater yield. They still haven't had the determination of when that project will roll out. Right now with LAIF, if we call by 10 o'clock in the morning, we get the funds that afternoon. So it's cash in the bank right now. We're looking at trying to get something a little bit more yield and a little bit more longer term. We're still looking at medium-term notes, the munis on the secondary market. They may be issued at like a 5% interest rate, but you pay such a premium, it drives down your yield to less than a percentage point for 2 to 3 years. So it's a challenge, but it helps us on the borrowing side.
Jeff, can you speak to where you think the Fed's going to go in the next meeting?
Probably raise the discount rate 25 basis points. Everything's looking that way. There's a little bit more inflation pressure to push it upwards, and I think more and more of the governors are taking more of an aggressive viewpoint that says we have to move forward. Even though there's pressure in Europe to have zero rates, I think here you're going to see it. But it's not the rate increases that they anticipated back in December, that they were going to measure maybe 2, 3, or even 4 25 basis point increases. You may see one in June at the next meeting, but you're not going to see another one before the elections. That's just my guess.
And you're still on track to have an early payout on that one note?
The Wallace, yes, it is actually included in the budget. So staff's request is for your board to receive and accept the quarterly investment report for the period ending March 31st, 2016.
I would like to make that motion.
Second?
Do we need to make a motion to receive and accept it? Okay. All right, we have a motion and a second. Is there any public comment? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Okay, where are we? Okay, item 5E, discussion action regarding fiscal year preliminary budget. Jeffrey Meyer again.
Excuse me, I'm a little under the weather here, so if you don't mind, I'll make this short.
Promise?
Jeff will mind.
The item before you is the introduction of and the submission of the preliminary operating and capital improvement program budgets for fiscal year 16-17. This is a process, and in the past years, we've usually presented it. I've taken a great deal of time introducing it, and then the next day we have a budget hearing. What I'm going to be doing today is submitting the budget to you for review, and our budget hearing is June 9th. So you'll have 2 weeks to review and digest the budget, come up with questions, and I'll be available for questions between now and that point in time. So what I basically want to do is to walk through briefly the budget, how we determined the budget, some of the different driving forces and some of the factors that we had in looking at it, and also some of the assumptions we've made. You have two documents before you. One is the PowerPoint presentation, and the other is the budget document showing the summary, the revenues, the department budgets, capital outlay, and the CIP budgets for both water and wastewater, which your board reviewed and approved the 5-year CIP back in March, I believe it was. So these are things that you're all familiar with. At this particular point, I want to stress again, it's going to be very quick. I just want to go through it, and if you have any questions, let me know, but I'm sure we'll be back on the 9th for more questions. This budget was given to the Finance Committee last week. However, I have to make note here to Director Mills and Director Underhill, there have been several changes since that point. And so we've had to make some changes, and we even had one cost increase that we found out last Friday that I'll go into in just a moment. Revenues have been a challenge in the last several years because of coming out of the recession, the drought, as it's worked on water revenues and such. This year it's a little bit better. I'm a little bit more optimistic. I don't see us returning to very high water revenues on the consumptive side. So I'm looking for operating revenues that are going to go up $424,000. Water revenues are going to go up a little bit. Remember, we have some growth, new connections, same with wastewater. We are going to increase our wholesale sales projections by $64,500. That's bringing Blue Lake Springs online. So that's a big part of it. Non-operating revenues is only going to go up about $100,000 or 3.3%. Property tax revenues are a little flat. And I got these numbers from the county, so we're pretty solid on those projections. But we are going to get a little bit more in Hogan Power, New Hogan Power. We've been talking to MID and such, and they believe our revenues are going to return back to 12-13 levels because of the amount of water. I didn't budget back up to that high because they said we'll be back in the $250 range per year. I did increase it by $125,000 up to $150,000 in projected revenues. However, we also are going to have an increase in our operating costs, our O&M, by more than $125,000.
This is tied to the power market to a great degree, isn't it?
Part of it is the water behind the reservoir. NCPA is different. NCPA is based on the Bureau's composite index for construction costs. And actually, NCPA has been flat, and sometimes it's dropped, and it's adjusted accordingly, or quarterly, I should say.
I was just speaking to New Hogan.
But New Hogan, it's more along the lines of requirements, but also the water behind the reservoir. Transfers in. This is where we transfer money from one fund into the general fund to cover costs. Water rights expenses, we're going to move $220,000 from the water rights reserve fund over to the general fund. We budgeted some this year. I don't know where we stand at this particular point in time, but we're probably not going to hit the budgeted amount. We budgeted about $190,000 this current fiscal year. But I think with the way the revenues are and the expenses were down a little bit, We may not have to touch the water rights reserve. This coming fiscal year, we will. It's to pay for legal costs, consulting costs, including John Mills' agreement for water resources. Our CIP, capital outlay and capital R&R expenses. When we look at this, we have a number of capital equipment purchases that we're going to have to make, and that's including your budget and capital outlay. We don't have enough ongoing revenue to pay for this. We continue to rely upon one-time monies or property tax monies to pay for ongoing expenses. We're going to have to address that later on this year after the audit. We have some money coming in from the R&R programs to cover staff. When we looked at the 5-year CIP program, we allocated costs to CIPs, R&R, and such. We did an exhaustive study working through Charles Palmer, district engineer, Teresa Tanaka, utilities manager, and this is based on their estimate of people's time spending on these projects. So it's an allocation process. Debt service, we have money for our BBVA loan. This is a 2013 loan. It's coming from expansion funds. Some of it is coming from the 108 account. That's a portion for Jenny Lynn Water Expansion Fund. Good news this year, we've originally budgeted $380,000 from Jenny that would be backfilled from property tax money to cover Jenny Lynn. We're only going to need $51,000 because of all the connections in the building going on down there. Being very conservative and estimating 10 new connections down there. I think we're going to be ahead of that, but that just means that if we get more connections, that's less money we have to transfer. We are going to have to move money from the R&R funds for the UMCO loan. That's just because we put the budget in the general fund budget. And $75,000 in unallocated interest for the building loan. Next year, in fiscal year 17-18, is the last year we have the BBVA loan. Then we're going to start paying down the principal on the admin building. The final is, I've added this since the Finance Committee meeting, our O&M budget for New Hogan went up $155,000. Army Corps of Engineers made improvements last year to the flood control gates and the spillways, and now us and Stockton East are having to pay for some of that work. Because we didn't have enough funds, revenues to cover it, we're going to have to do a one-time movement from special project fund, property taxes to cover that.
And unfortunately, those are costs that's within the discretion of the Army Corps to make those improvements, and we basically find out when we're asked to pay the cost of it, and it's the agreements that are in place and requirements that we unfortunately have to comply with.
This is since it's an ongoing cost, it's something we're going to have to address after the audit, when we do our cost of service study. It's something that we have to pay. And we reduced some of our $50,000 in another portion of the budget to help offset this, but we can hope that revenues, water revenues will be greater, but we can't rely upon that, so we have to basically budget in property tax money.
I have a question. For all of this debt service, we're transferring,
Yes.
Can we ever get a closer, budget figure so that we wouldn't have to transfer all of this for debt service? Because we know debt service, right? We know the figures.
Yes, and what we're doing is in the general fund that we're budgeting for, in the operating budget, that's where we make the payments from. So this money is coming from other funds to pay their portion of the debt. In the BBVA loan, that's the old 2004 revenue bond that we refinanced. That bond consolidated operating loans and 4 loans in the Ebbets Pass Water Fund, Jenny Lynn Water Fund, Copper Cove Water Fund, and Copper Cove Sewer Fund. So those funds are responsible for the debt, and that comes to about 2 million, a little less than $1.2 million. So instead of the general fund paying their portion of the debt, we move money from those three funds into the general fund to pay their portion of the debt.
And we did that at a much lower rate.
Yeah. So that's all we're doing. Instead of, since we budget in the general fund, we just have to shift the funds over and pay for it. Because if we didn't, you don't have that transparency. It's a little difficult to understand the transfers, but we're showing exactly what our debt obligations are.
And those debt, the debt service and the issuance of the debt to fund the improvements is something that's, it's something that's perfectly, normal to do, and we would have to do in the case of providing for the infrastructure we need to provide for the additional connections as they come on in time. And that's, exactly why part of that, each connection fee is for that additional capacity. So we have to be a little ahead of the curve. We obviously don't want to, and that's why exactly what we're facing right now down in La Quintana, we're trying to be ahead of the growth that we expect down there. So, that just to keep in mind that we will, this is a model that we would continue to do. Could be other financing vehicles, but the idea that we would have debt to, finance these improvements, that's a, normal thing to do.
And the BBVA loan, the last payment we make, principal and interest, is in September 2017.
Right.
So we're very close.
Yeah.
67% of the original debt in that loan came from expansion funds. 33% comes from the operating fund. So we move 67% of the annual debt payments into the operating fund to pay that portion. It's about $600,000 a year from the operating fund. Yes, it's a little small, but you have a much better view of it in your handout. These are our revenues. When I look at operating and non-operating revenues, that's the variance to budget, the third column over, we're up about $500,000, which isn't bad, all things considered. I'm somewhat pleased in that because we see more in water and wastewater revenues. We see a little bit more in power sales, although actually NCPA was flat. And so all in all, we're not doing too bad. And this is on the conservative side. So budgeted revenues, non-operating and operating, are up 3.5%. I hope we get more water sales, and that'll help significantly. This is where the transfers in, where it can be a little confusing. The first category is transfers in for debt service. I talked about that in the last slide. So it just shows you all the loans we're covering for debt service, whether it's the BBVA loan, the Umpqua loan, the building loan. But I also have $81,000 being transferred in for the payoff of the Wallace loan, getting that one off the books. It's a one-time cost. There's the money for New Hogan, show you the $220 for water rights, the money we have to bring in for capital projects and equipment. We are being a little aggressive, and I'll get into that in a second, but I think it's long overdue. We start replacing the number of our vehicles. And again, R&R projects and CIP projects for salaries and benefits that occur in the general fund, mainly in utilities and also in engineering. And these figures are based upon time projections by utilities and engineering. So overall, our transfers went up 30%. The majority of that is due to, we see some R&R project increases and such, but we also have the Wallace loan has gone up. So overall, between transfers and operations, operating and non-operating revenues, just under a 7.5% increase. Now let's
And
go
again, just to note one more time, I know we've said this many times, but that ability to maximize use of our internal staffing resources on these projects, on R&R, is a really cost-effective way that we can do these projects and ensure the highest quality and best product when we get to the end of it.
And building on that, we did look at the ability of utilities to handle these construction projects, and we are gonna add one position in utilities, another inspector, because we have multiple projects going on, and we need to be able to not only handle our day-to-day work, which includes inspecting meter installations and other things, we need to be able to handle these projects. So we're adding 1.5 new positions this year in an inspector and a half-time accounting tech, but we're also deleting one position. That was the assistant to the general manager.
Yeah. And that's curious, because I saw that entry in there, and I was going to ask if that was,
I'm happy if you want to reconsider that one.
But remember, we budgeted hit Larry's position for basically almost a half a year. And when Bill retired, it was kind of Teresa went into that position, Jesse went into Teresa's position, so those were kind of a wash. It was more along the lines of Larry's position on retirement.
Yeah, and again, that one position, the inspector position, this is a service we've got to obtain. I mean, either we go outside and contract for it, or we do it internally. I'd much rather have the internal, again, the quality control and the accountability. That's every day, those are your eyes and ears, and recording the progress on these projects to make sure that we really do get the highest product and we can stay within budget and address any potential claims that arise. So.
PERS costs have been going up as there's by 135,000. There's a COLA increase for SEIU as of July 1, 3%. Management confidential is a 1%. Now, just a reminder, employees pay their full share, the employee share. CCWD pays the employer share. And we are projecting a medical cost insurance increase of 8%. However, the way they do our finances, we know what the first 6 months are going to be of the fiscal year from July 1 through December 31st. We don't know what the second 6 months are going to be. That's where the estimate comes in. Now, individual departments, board of directors, their budget is going up by a little over 18,000. Salaries and benefits are increasing. Most of that's the benefit side because of insurance costs. And it's a little bit deceiving when you see percentage increase on a smaller amount. But we are going to have an increase of $7,000 for elections. This cost goes from 7,000 to 0 to another number, all based on the number of elections that are going on. However, we have reduced our overall election costs because we're part of we don't do the mail-in ballots anymore.
I know that that question was asked in one of our meetings about how much savings you derive from moving it from, odd year to even.
It's actually, it was moving it from just a mail-in ballot to being in with the regular election cycle.
But it was odd to even.
Is that, yes?
Yeah.
So it was more along the lines of, we no longer have to pay for all the mail and the counting the ballots that way. That's where we ended up having the majority of the savings. There is a balancing out process because of the way, when we moved over, it's when the seats were becoming open. But in the long run, it's just all going to be the mailing costs and the cheaper election process.
In every way.
When we look at general management, the budget decreased by $147,000. The majority of this was moving John Mills' contract over to water resources. That's where we're capturing all our water costs, which is an appropriate place for it. With the assistant GM retirement, we have some savings there, and we reduced the outside legal budget by $25,000. Thank you, Matt.
There goes that new car.
Admin services, we reduced it by $20,000. This is in part by, we're moving, transferring the meter readers over to utilities. to better utilize their time and to help backfill the guys in the field, because there's times when they're down and they need some help in the field, which will be easier to coordinate. We are adding a part-time position, which is a half-time accounting tech. This position will have no benefits because it's just half-time, it's salaried, and it's about $25,000. And this is to help us with our purchasing process, our billing process, and our AP process. And we are going to increase $25,000 in professional services. Part of this is we're looking at our cost of service study that we're going to undertake this year, and I anticipate that to be about $50,000 for part of our rate study, yes. So it's a long process because this time around, we are not just working off of the revenue requirements. We're digging in deep to the cost of service for both the water and the wastewater side. And we have to realize, too, that since wastewater has been running negative, we really have to come up with real costs associated with that. And the other part of it is when we look at our rate process, we have to be in compliant with some of the new court cases that are going on. And we have moved payroll services to general management. HR has taken over payroll. We have ADP and some of the other processes. Stacy and Deja do that. It's moved out of accounting. So we basically shifted the financing and the responsibility of those contracts over to them. Since Stacy's overseeing those contracts, the funding source goes to her area, which is general management.
So she could see all parts of it.
Yes. Engineering technical services, budget decrease of $63,000, due in part to the transfer of the inspector over from engineering to utilities. Last year, we were looking at moving the inspector from utilities to engineering. We did so in the budget, but after the budget was done, we were looking at it, and it just made more sense to keep it in utilities. The responsibility stayed in utilities. It's just we never moved the funding back and forth. So this is basically a correction of the personnel allocation and funding. It's not a correction of the reporting process.
Jeff, are you estimating that CPPA will continue that rate as a permanent increase, or do you feel that with the water year, the higher flows, that they will reduce it, considering the cost of power is so low?
They generally lag in their rates, so we won't see a decrease for a year or two, if any, at that particular point in time.
So you're not building anything into the budget?
I'm not building a decrease in the budget. I have a feeling once something goes up, it very rarely goes down. Teresa's done a great job of reducing laboratory costs, and so we see a decrease in the budget there. State and federal fees continue to go up. We have to add $50,000 for that. And capital outlay has gone up a little bit as well. And I'm going to get into the detail on that in just a moment. Water resources, this is Peter's budget. It's increased by about $114,000. Part of that is in moving John Mills' contract over. So that is the bulk of it, but we reduced some costs in other areas as well. But we have a real good plan on how to address our water rights and some of the planning issues that we face on both the Moak, the Stanislaus, and also the Calaveras area issue. We have groundwater requirements built into that because that's going to be an ongoing process as well. Non-departmental budget increase by $322,000. The biggest increase is the new Hogan. We just found out about this on Friday. Retiree health costs go up $86,000. That's a combination of current retirees, but we're also putting in away more money in our trust fund. Remember, we're funding that on an annual basis, and we use the GASB 45 actuarial study as the basis for that. We did see a decrease in JPIA property and liability insurance by about 19,000, and that's in part, due in part by our own claim history, so we're doing better on that. And debt service increased by 86,000, but that's the Wallace, that's gonna be a one-time increase. And then next year, we're gonna see a decrease in debt service because the BBVA loan will drop down to about $450,000. Here's our capital outlay needs. We've kind of deferred vehicle replacement for a while. So this list is a culmination of several meetings that Teresa had with her field staff, her supervisors and such, and they put together a list of what they saw is needed out in the field, not only vehicle replacement, but some of the projects that they're going to be working on. And we did deny 2 items. They wanted to purchase, they still would like to get another mini excavator. They find that's very helpful in the field. And they would like to purchase a pumper truck at some point as an alternative to the back-ons. But there's just not enough money to fund those. Combined, those would have been about $240,000.
Excuse me, don't we have a brand-new building, and wouldn't it have had a brand-new phone system?
No, the phone system came with us. Cisco, we have our phone system, part of the IT area, that's came with us from the old building, and it's manufactured by Cisco. It's beyond its life. In fact, they no longer offer support nor replacement parts. So those have a shelf life of between 8 and 10 years, and then you have to upgrade the backbone. So the building was not, they did not build the phone system into the building. It was migrated over from the old building. Same with our whole IT system.
Just a question, Jeff. If operations was given an incentive to reduce expenses in various areas, would we be willing to entertain them purchasing a capital have a capital outlay of an additional pickup or whatever?
We could do that, incentivize it.
Right.
That's an idea we can look at. One of the things I've always wanted to do is actually build into the budget an annual cost for vehicles based on mileage, based on individual vehicles. So you're building up a fund, so by the time you get to the end of the life of that vehicle, there's money there. We just haven't, it's been, since 2008 in the recession, it's been real difficult. We've just been limping along.
Let's put that in as a finance agenda item that
Certainly.
we can discuss, because I got some ideas on how we can do that.
Thank you. Salaries and benefits, this is a breakdown expenditure summary, salaries and benefits on the top line. It's gone up $737,000. Some of it's the COLA, some of it's PERS, but we also have that new position. Services and supplies, that's a list of everything from CPPA to, which has gone up in budget-wise over $170,000, to New Hogan. So between those right there, we're looking at about $350,000 worth of increases. So we've done a good job of managing things that we can somewhat control, but those things that are outside of our control, we have to factor in. Capital outlays going up $89,000, and debt service $87,000, but that's the Wallace loan. That's a one-time payment. So overall, our operating expenses go up $1.3 million. Here's the breakdown by department. This is all in your budget package that I presented to you, so you can see the detailed line items. And then a summary is revenues less expenses. We're looking at pretty much a balanced budget. This is on page 13. Of about $3,600 surplus. One of the things to keep in mind here is, since water sales have been budgeted for conservatively, if they go higher than anticipated and people start using more water again, then our reliance upon transfers in specifically from the special property tax and from the water rights will be reduced. But we just have to be conservative and budget at the higher amount. It can always go down. So selling water is a good thing. Using water is a good thing, from my perspective.
Yeah, because again, Jeff, we've lost, what, about $600,000 a year in revenue since 2013?
That is correct.
Yeah.
And you're only estimating 3% increase year over year now?
Yes. I just, as Joel mentioned, we just don't know how the public's going to react. Plus, we've had a pretty wet spring. And I don't know how the people's behavior, our customers' behavior is going to be over time in using water. I'm hoping it goes higher. Now, personnel allocation, I mentioned that we're added a construction inspector and a half-time accounting tech. We deleted the assistant to the general manager. So our total allocation increased 0.5, a half a person. Now, the majority of the costs associated with the inspector will be paid from projects. Now, these two slides you're not going to be able to see very well. It's the water and wastewater. It's a little bit better in your handouts. There's been one change to this year's projected budget. I'm sorry, for next year's 16-17. We had to add a project in the water side, and that is the Vista del Lago State Route 26 pipe relocation. I think you're all aware that there's going to be some building in that area. PG&E's already gone in and had to relocate. Our water line is in the Caltrans right away. They want it moved this summer. So we had to add about $150,000 for that. That's coming out of our pocket. However, in the long run, once they construct down there the new buildings and everything, we're looking forward to
realize those.
Yes.
It seems to be a common theme here, the state keeps giving, and this is one where, because it's Caltrans' senior right-of-way, we have no choice but to relocate, so that's an expense we have to take on.
Are we doing this one in-house?
Pardon?
Are we doing this one in-house?
We're doing the design in-house, is my understanding, but we'll actually go out to bid on the construction contract, yes.
Yeah.
It's just really important that we always check when Caltrans says that they own the right of way.
Sometimes they don't.
They don't always own it. They make assumptions, and I just want to make sure that we're not, I mean, I've got some real history in regards to this, and their property folks assume that they own, for the most part, all of Highway 26 within a great distance on each side, and when in fact they don't. So I just hope that we're always taking that extra step to ensure that whether or not we're in the right of way or not.
So the next step is 2 weeks from tomorrow, we're going to have a budget workshop, Thursday, June 9th, and then the proposed budget goes to your board for adoption on June 22nd.
Okay?
And that's all I have.
Thank you for doing the abbreviated version.
Well, this means I don't have to have much of a budget workshop, correct?
Right.
And with the 2 weeks interim that you have to study it.
All our questions.
We'll send Terry in here on his own to review all this stuff.
And again, if you have any questions between now and the workshop, please feel free to ask me. I will incorporate those and report back to the full board of the questions. But I'm hoping that things go much smoother and quicker on the 9th.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, nothing. I'm gonna sneeze. Excuse me. All right, we'll move on to 5F, discussion action regarding closing out the 2015 CalPERS audit. Stacy?
Good morning.
Morning.
As a member of the CalPERS system, all members are subject to random CalPERS audit. The district in 2015 was subject to one of those random audits. CalPERS staff has increased their audit staff significantly within the last year, doubling their staff size. And many of our local agencies are also experiencing these type of random audits. CalPERS is focusing on several different aspects of their CalPERS rules and regulations, some of which were captured within our audit, which I'll explain here in a little bit. After working with CalPERS audit for most of 2015, we were issued a final report on August 31st, and there were 11 findings. Since receiving the audit reports, we have been working vigorously to achieve the best possible outcome for the district. Before we start, I'd like to thank Patty, our accountant, and Deja, who is the HR technician, for their help with the audit. This has been a huge undertaking that we did not plan for. And they have helped me tremendously in gathering data, creating spreadsheets, checking. We're checking each other's work and making sure that we're doing all we can for the district and to comply with CalPERS.
And I just want to note, Stacy's done an incredible job on this. I mean, I can imagine, I'm sure, hundreds of hours in dealing with this. And, you know, I think, just to be clear, a lot of, you know, the things that we're dealing with here in the findings, or, you know, things that were put in place by, you know, people and staff that were here some decades ago in prior, you know, agreements, MOUs that are not here anymore. And, you know, Stacy and the rest of our staff, we're trying to make the most of this situation and put us in the best position going forward as we close this out. And, you know, it's, you know, with that's been the guiding principle that we've tried to work with here. And I think what we bringing to you today, I'm confident this is the best possible outcome that we could present. So with that, thanks, Stacy.
Thanks. So through this whole process with CalPERS, we've been working closely with Liebert, Cassidy, and Whitmore, who are very experienced in representing agencies who go through CalPERS audits. And they have helped me on several occasions. Of the 11 findings, 7 were relatively simple changes. They were things that the district needed to do, make changes in the way we report payroll. And all these changes have been completed, and we have been, since October of last year, been reporting correctly with CalPERS. The remaining 4 findings, CalPERS does require us to receive board action in order to close the audit findings. So I'll review the remaining 4 findings right now. The first finding requires the district to take the existing wage scales, which you, the board, have already agreed to in the management confidential current agreement and the SEIU current MOU. And they're requiring us to reformat them into one document. Nothing changes on the wage scales. It's just an administrative document that they want the board to approve separately from the MOUs and wage scales. In fact, in June, you'll see me, I'll be back again with the wage scale for next fiscal year. That is the combination of both management confidential and SEIU wage scales.
Yeah, to be clear again, this does not in any way change the compensation or benefits for any employees by doing this. It just combines the existing information into one form. And this, like the other findings, are us doing what we're required to do by the interpretation of CalPERS staff. And we've done everything we can to, again, limit the list of things and try to come up with the best solution for the district.
And one of the things is we do have to take this back to 2012. So you'll see in your agenda packet that we have to go back to 2012 and forward. Okay. The second finding requires the district to report the monetary value of the uniform rental and maintenance as special compensation for those employees who are required to wear it per our SEIU MOU. Only our field employees are required to wear it, so this language isn't in the management and confidential units agreement. When we started the discussing the audit findings with CalPERS, they originally told us that we were gonna have to report all active and past employees back to 1997 when this requirement appeared in our MOU. However, we were able to work with CalPERS, and we now only need to report back to 2011 for active and retired employees. And this is huge. It cuts out a lot of reporting time for staff, and it cuts our reporting liability with CalPERS in half. We are also working with the SEIU to lower our uniform costs, so it will then lower our reporting requirement with CalPERS in the future. And the union is very receptive and is wanting to work with us to come up with a solution to do that. The third finding requires an update to the SEIU MOU to indicate that the uniform reporting is considered special compensation, and that's just a requirement of CalPERS regulations for the uniform reporting. The district kind of wants to take it a step further and also update the MOU sections for longevity pay, certification pay, and wastewater stipend. That is also considered special compensation. It's not necessarily a part of the audit, but it makes everything more clear with CalPERS. Then the last finding is CalPERS had determined that the compensation for the employees within the pay for performance ranges on the management and confidential units salary schedules did not meet the definition of base pay rate or special compensation under their rules and regulations. Therefore, we could not report it as such. We worked with legal counsel. We've been working closely with CalPERS audit staff, and we had several options that management had weighed. There were 3 options. Option 1 was to agree with CalPERS that this could not be reported as pay rate or special compensation. This would likely end up in costly litigation for the district with a number of active and retired employees, because it would reduce their retirement benefit to step 5 versus their the performance range salary. Option 2 was to appeal the finding with the CalPERS Board of Administration. This would incur costs for the districts in the tens of thousands of dollars with no guarantee that it would be a positive outcome. The last option, which is staff's recommendation, is to amend the management and confidential unit salary schedule back to 2012 to clarify that the performance ranges were in fact pay steps, and that they can therefore continue to be reported as base pay rate to CalPERS. As mentioned earlier, we've been working many hours over the last 9 months, and been working closely with legal staff and with CalPERS audit staff to reduce all impacts to the district. 3 of the 4 findings, which I just reviewed, do require changes that will result in fiscal impacts to the district. The first is the uniform reporting, by having to report the uniform rental and maintenance costs back to 2011. That'll result in an approximately $15,000 cost to the district. And the updating of performance ranges to steps for the management and confidential group back to July 2012 will result in retro pays back to 2 active employees and 2 retired employees in the amount of around $60,000. This does not include any fines. This is all retro payments, retro pay back to CalPERS directly. And these costs can be handled within the existing budgets. We don't need to do any budget transfers. We have some savings this year that will allow for us to pay this and close all the findings out by the end of this fiscal year with CalPERS. Any questions?
Stacy, if I did just note as well, again, one of the key things that we wanted to accomplish was to be able to finish this, close it out, and move on, and not bring a recommendation to the board that would put us in a position of potentially having to, one, either go into an appeal with CalPERS that, again, we don't know the outcome, tens of thousands of dollars, and potentially could have an outcome imposed upon us that we would not want to entertain, or likewise to be in a position where we're basically creating a situation where employees are now, their compensation, retirement compensation has changed, and we're looking at creating litigation. So, again, we're trying to make the most of the situation. I got to thank Stacy and her staff again. They've done a really good job to get to this. I know it's not pleasant to have to deal with an audit and close out like this, but I do believe that this is the best we could have made of the situation, and going forward, I think we're in a lot better position. The one thing I'd like to say too on that, the change of the performance steps to base steps, I would note, I think this could be a very valuable way for us to help retain some of our most senior managers who otherwise might feel that they were topped out within their position, and might be looking to retire earlier if they have the opportunity to stay and to see those incremental steps as they stay more years, which would be very, very valuable to us. Having just lost two of our most senior people, we know the very, very difficult in trying to, the lost institutional knowledge, and there's expenses associated with that. So I think that is valuable for us.
I have a question. You said that this whole audit thing took about 9 months?
The audit itself started in February of 2015. We received our final audit report on August 31st of 2015. And since then, we've been working with CalPERS on the audit findings since then.
Because I'm just curious as to whether or not they would ever come back to us and say, what did this do to you financially? That's...
CalPERS? Well, I think this will be completed, this will be done and behind us, and that's why the closeout is the key thing. Closing these findings out, and most of them have already been closed out by staff, but these are the ones that we have to ask for the board's action, and I think that puts these issues behind us. We have certainty as far as how they interpret it, how we have to, and again, and one of the key things to understand here is the regulations that are being applied to us and other local agencies by CalPERS are, voluminous. There are, and this is a whole body of law based on this, and that's why we relied heavily on our expert outside counsel. So, and a lot of these things are subject to the interpretation of their staff, but at least on these issues, we're certainly will move forward. We could always be subject, like any other agency, to an audit again, and as we've seen, there may be issues that they become focused on, like they have with us and others. And I just want to say I feel more confident in the position that we're in now with the HR department that we have and in the staff that we have. We have very professional, very responsible people, and we will work hard to with this and anything else going forward again to put us in the best position we possibly can.
But I'd like to congratulate or thank you, Stacy, for all your hard work. I know you've been doing this, working on resolving these issues for an awful long time, and the rest of the staff that's worked with you. It does seem like it'd be a very diligent process, and I am very happy with our outcome. We have discussed these issues before from this audit, and the fact that there's 11 findings that are of no fault of anyone here today, except for maybe Director Davidson. He's been here long enough. But other than that, I think it's a very good job, and I do think we did the right thing. We're working with SEIU and on that MIU with uniforms, and that is the right thing to do. And the other outcome is going to cost us a little bit of money, but I certainly agree with staff recommendation that we not go to enter into a lawsuit situation or a situation where we might be subject to. Just throwing to the mercy of some arbitration procedure where we might be forced to do something, electing our own outcome and biting the bullet. And I think it is the right thing to do at this point. It is affecting our employees who were here at the time, who we know didn't obtain their full benefits while they were here, retired, and two that are still here. And I do congratulate staff for bringing this to us and certainly support it.
Thank you.
I do also want to note, I think we've got an excellent relationship right now with the existing officers of SEIU, our employees that are the officers, and they genuinely want to find a way that we can make a change to this requirement on uniforms that will save us money, into the future. So that's something I want to come back and let you know as we make progress on that. We hope to have that finished soon. And that's, so that it is heartening to see that, and I'm hopeful that'll be a model for us to do some other things in the future as well that'll be good for all of us.
And I'd like to add my thanks. Also, Stacy, I know how hard it's been for
Thank you.
you and your staff. Thank you.
Thank you.
Motion?
Well, I still think it's, I mean, certainly the work that went into this was astounding. When you go back and look at the fact that uniforms need to be considered to be part of compensation. I could just imagine, and I wonder if everybody's being treated equally on this in relation to CalPERS, if they're sending out this sort of an audit to everybody. But it sure seemed like a nitpicky thing to be getting into. And certainly there was no, there was no reason that we would want to consider it, anything other than, identifying our representatives to the public, not as a member of compensation. I doubt if they believed it was compensation, to have to wear a uniform to identify themselves so they don't get, shot when they go to a service call or something. But anyway, that's,
And the
This is-
uniform is one of the hot buttons of CalPERS right now, because most agencies probably are not reporting it. In fact, I've been talking with other HR professionals and other districts, and I've been sharing our language with them as they're updating their MOUs because they aren't reporting it either.
wow. Yeah.
Do we need 3 separate motions on this?
Real quick, think of those very small agencies that we have even in this county that at some point are going to have to bite the bullet as well.
Yes.
Well, but
They're not even aware
but-
that it's out there.
you know that they're not gonna go after the smaller agencies, that they're not
They
gonna
don't
get
have any money to do it.
compensation back from them. They're gonna go for the larger agencies that have many employees that, to get more money into the pot. It's just, God bless California.
Okay,
Okay, you wanna run this meeting, or you want me
I'm going to make a motion. I don't need your permission.
to? No, I wanna know if we can do them all at once. That's why.
No, we can't. We already found that out.
Okay. All right, shoot. Looking for a motion.
All right, thank you. I'd like to make a motion, we approve side letter agreement and memorandum of understanding with SEIU Local 1021, effective July 1st, 2012 through June 30th, 2017, to close the 2015 CalPERS audit findings.
Do I have a motion? Is there a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Is there any public comment? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Motion, we make a motion approving side letter agreement of the compensation agreement with Management and Confidential Unit effective July 1st, 2015 through June 30th, 2016, to close the 2015 CalPERS audit findings.
I believe it was 2018.
2018 to close the 2015 CalPERS.
I have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
A motion and a second. Is there any public comment regarding this item? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Motion carries.
Motion approved listing of existing pay schedules of SEIU Local 1021 Management Confidential Unit and General Manager position to close the 2015 CalPERS audit findings.
Motion, is there a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Is there any public comment? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. All right, thank you. I bet you're glad that's over.
Stacy.
I know I am. Okay, General Manager's report.
Yes, Mr. Vice President, members of the board, the only other item that I'd like to mention is just that unfortunately the outcome of our income survey that we did for the Sheep Ranch community. As you know, we had, to be characterized as a disadvantaged community, it's based on census block information from the last census. That's on a larger scale for community-wise. that sometimes doesn't capture, smaller pockets, areas like we would have in an area like we suspect in Sheep Ranch that we believe by census it doesn't qualify as a disadvantaged community, but we believe that it would qualify. And to show that, we would do an income survey to make that happen, to gather the information, and then to have that credible information that we can present to the state. Peter Martin, who's going to probably pop in a second, he's been leading this effort. We worked with the state. This is important, particularly for our ability to get state revolving fund, funding, some of which, well, depending on whether it's severely disadvantaged, as we've seen in West Point, Wilseyville, can be complete loan forgiveness, so basically 100% grant for important infrastructure projects. We worked with them to get clear the path so that we could go forward with an income survey for the Sheep Ranch community and to try to get funding to do some projects like replacing their water treatment plant and dealing with some of the challenges, some of the serious fire suppression capability challenges that we have there as we experienced in the Butte fire. We had informed the public that we were doing this. We were at public town hall meeting there with President Strange. We told them this was very important. We needed their participation so that we could make the showing, so that we could better our odds to get funding for these projects. And unfortunately, so we actually retained a consultant to help us do this, and there was a substantial expense associated with that. We sent letters out to our customers asking them to complete that. We got very little response. So at the town hall meeting, we said, okay, what can we do to make you comfortable with being able to submit this in a way that you don't feel like you're going to be personally identified? And there was just probably a feeling that we don't want to give information we deem to be sensitive information to a government agency. And so Peter worked hard, and our consultant came up with a strategy to try to address that by having actually drop box there at the fire station. It was all anonymous. The information was submitted, but would be anonymous, and unfortunately that didn't result in very little additional response. So bottom line, we've made every effort, other than simply going and knocking on people's doors, which I frankly don't think is really appropriate, given the fact that we know the public understands where we're coming from and they don't want to participate. So with that, we're going to close this effort out. Unfortunately, we're going to provide notice to our customers there that we're sorry this wasn't successful. It very well may have some adverse impact on our ability to get funds for projects there, but that we've done everything we can at this point, and sorry to report that's the outcome, but that is where we're at with it. So with that, unless you have any questions, that's all I have. And Peter, how much did we on that effort? I know we had a consulting firm to help us with that. We've done income surveys in other areas of the county, and that's been successful. But how much on this one in particular?
So yeah, we did enter into contract with Adams Ashby Group to do the income surveys. This is kind of their thing, and we spent a few $1,000s just to go through a couple rounds of income surveys and contact mailings, assembling all the information, and yeah, it's kind of unfortunate this is where we are, and I did spend a lot of time. Even we made physical contact with the community through the town hall meetings that we had, just saying, hey, this is what we're working on, and they were appreciative of the extensive links we went to try to keep it anonymous, yet we still got no response. So I can't really make any judgment as to what the reasoning is, but it's kind of what we're left with. For safety purposes, I have to agree. I don't think it's a good idea to go out there and have people walking around door to door, approaching these people. And
Why not?
Yeah, I mean, and truthfully,
We're in a proper uniform, it'd be okay.
yeah.
Level 3 at least.
So, and truthfully, I mean, there's a lot of effort that goes into this, even getting to the point where you can go out and do these income surveys. I had to write a formal letter to the state board, who's a prospective funding agency, asking for permission to go forward with the income survey. We additionally, so this is not in a vacuum. And there's specific rules about and guidelines about how you go about these income surveys. They have to be done by a third party. You can't have the district out there influencing folks on how these go. So this is kind of what we're left with, and it's unfortunate that it didn't work out.
Yeah, and then I do want to thank those that did participate and submitted it and tried to help us come up with a strategy that would address people's concerns. But
How many people answered you?
So because it's such a small community, we had limitations there too. there is a requirement because of the number of folks that would participate in the survey that we get a 90% response rate. We got 26 responses out of 48 or so, so we definitely didn't quite get there.
That's not bad.
No,
50%.
Yeah.
that's
And I
almost
mean-
50%.
Well, it is, but we communicate, and there was we had a very good turnout at the town hall, and those are people that talk to everybody in the community, and that was, Peter explained this, like there's a high threshold for us to be able to qualify, and that's why it's, we gotta get people to respond and turn these in, but it just, people didn't want their names associated with that information submitted to an agency, so.
Well, based on what we did receive, would it have qualified if more people had given similar answers?
Yeah, if we had gotten to the 90% threshold, then it could be verified by the funding agencies involved, that there's a sort of a,
I think he's asking about, was
it severely disadvantaged community or
of the respondents, did you guys ever do the math?
I don't have access to that information. I suppose I could get it, but, at this point,
Yeah.
I was hoping that it still would remain in the third-party contractor's hands, and then they could assemble a report to the state. So we don't look at that. I was still hopeful that we would get to a point where we would have that information compiled, and they, just draw it out, get the median.
No, that's a shame. Okay, anything else, General Manager? All right, board reports, information, future agenda items, Bertha?
Okay, one of the things that we didn't talk about, but we don't really have a lot of time, because I know Dave and Matt have an appointment. We didn't talk about we haven't talked about the Aqua Conference because we just came back. But that was, I thought it was wonderful. I hadn't been to an Aqua Conference in how long, and just to reconnect, and the value of the presentations or the different meetings that they had were very, very beneficial. And I have to give kudos to our district, because our general manager was in charge of 2 of the presentations. He chaired a Headwaters one, and what was the other one you did, Dave?
Drinking water issues.
Drinking water issues. So that was great for our GM to be all over the place. And then our director, Ratterman, R-A-D-D-E-R, also sat on one of the panels, which I thought was wonderful. So we were in there. CCWD was there. So that was just great. And, maybe in the future we can figure out another way to talk about what we learned.
Sure, and there's no reason we couldn't do that within the coming meetings, because the issues are still germane. They're trends and emerging trends. And Director, just to note, one thing I was really pleased to hear on one of the panels that I moderated on drinking water issues, it was the deputy director of the state water board's division of drinking water. So they're the division that took on the public water system regulatory program that was at the Department of Public Health. And Cindy Forbes is her name, and she actually called us out in the presentation, us and AWA, because Gene Mancebo was sitting there in the presentation, and said that we're an example of the agencies that do it the right way on being able to really taking on proactively issues like we've done with municipal water systems and things in our county, and how they very much wish that other agencies in the valley areas who have these contamination issues and other, private water systems and stuff would take our example and be proactive in dealing with their issues. So that was really nice to hear.
By the way, I have a hard copy of her presentation if anybody would like to take a look at it, and, I thought that was great. One of the, just quickly tell you, one of the sessions that I attended was Aqua 101, to talk about aqua. And, we all have been sitting on the board for a long time, some of us longer than others, but to really identify what aqua can do for us. And I brought a piece back to Joel, that he was not aware of, because it was very basic, and a lot of things, as I say, we don't know. And so I'll be more than happy to share outcome of that.
And just one real life example that we just had today, the whole idea of the self-certification, which we commented on, was spearheaded by Aqua. That was really a huge accomplishment to do that. So our ability to go from 13% to 0 may not have been possible, but for that advocacy through the group.
Okay, then I just have another couple of things. This was very interesting that I received from Cal Waste Recovery Systems. These are the people who pick up our trash, solid waste and recycling. This was a public opinion research that went out to their customers, and they had a couple of comments on water because they're looking at all the services that are provided to the customers. And the one under quality of service, water got a good to excellent rating as far as the customers were concerned. I was happy about that. However, the one that said value for the money was only fair to good. So that was, but I was really happy to see that we were part of this. The other thing that we did, Dave and I did the other day, was go look over Cedar Ridge subdivision, going up into Arnold on the right-hand side before you got to Mountain Mike's. Cedar Ridge is quite beautiful. The lots are only $300,000.
That's good too.
But it's going, when it gets built out, it's going to be pretty spectacular.
Oh, great.
Okay?
Director Mills.
Thank you. 4 PM, June the 2nd, Murphy Sanitary District for the Highway 4 Working Group. LAFCO had a discussion and brought up, and I think our legislative committee needs to take up SB 1318 walk. It has to do with water and wastewater infrastructure and services. It has to do with creating islands of service is where it goes. And then also SB 1913, I believe, is the other one about disadvantaged unincorporated communities and their impacts on water, wastewater. The SB 1979, which was Bigelow's bill for Utica Water and Power, is going through the system. Sierra Club had opposed it initially, and they had gotten together with the legislative analysts and managed to strike a compromise. They didn't have to do any amendments to it. They just better understand what the bill was about. But what it is that biomass has been getting credits from like PG&E for power generation, and they were removing hydro from it. So Bigelow's bill is to put hydro back in, especially small hydro, 5 megawatts or less. So we hope that that goes forward. If it does, then they should have this completed by August, but it won't be in time for them to do any modifications this year. It'd be something for next year for them. So we encourage you, water, to continue in that direction, because it is a difference right now, about $25 a megawatt hour versus 90 a megawatt hour under the other system. So it's a financial thing that they really need to have that help and be able to use it.
And I can't thank you enough, and the members, and Michael Winkler for bringing this forward to Highway 4 Committee. I mean, that was where we got this brought to us, and we were able to weigh in. We were able to the board supported the bill, and that he, according to Michael, that was very helpful. And this may be one of the most important things that could happen in our community, at least legislatively, in the last 5-10 years. I mean, this really will be an incredible help to them on the revenue side. Thank you.
Okay, Director Adamant?
Yeah, did want to comment that the Aqua Conference was very, very beneficial this year. A lot of stuff on watershed management, and I did attend a lot of classes on or sessions on that. And thank you, Bertha, for your comments on the presentations, and when CCWD was well represented, and then thanks to our general manager, Mr. Egerton. Mountain counties did have a great program last week, May 18th, up in Auburn and the Ridge. Another session, well attended. The subject matter I'm not going to have a time to go into here in a short time. We've got a camera meeting June 15th here in this room, and did want to make a request that we do set up a legal affairs committee meeting to discuss the issues that Director Mills has brought up, as well as further discussion on our continued attempts at getting in the door with the Bureau and things that are going on in Maloney's. That's all I got.
Okay. Well, I won't go into the Aqua much, but it was the watershed management programs were terrific. Also setting on some of the groundwater authority meetings, for lack of a better word. I thought it was, I love seeing all the work that's been talked all these years on the headwaters and forest management. I think that's critically important for Tuolumne, Calaveras, and Emerald counties. And it's good to see us out there, in the forefront. David did a great job moderating that panel. The panel was a great panel. I just really appreciated all that work. And then together with, the Cottonwood project coming forward, we're finally starting to see some progress. So I'm optimistic about that. And I think, it's people just don't understand that 80% of the pine trees in the Sierras, could be dead. It's astounding that, that what that's going to do. And then also, to talk about, you're talking about the subsidization of the biomass plants. There's no place for that forest waste if we don't have, a subsidized biomass. And we need to be lobbying to get that into the governor's priorities. Otherwise, there's going to be no place for that forest fuel. And it one day will burn. It's going to happen. So I just think that we may have been starting too late, but at least it seems like people are starting to take it serious and recognize, all the benefits of that program. So with that, that's all I have.
Could I just make one more comment? We were, in talking at mountain counties, we're talking about the number of trees that have died already, and we're talking 29 million trees have died, and they're looking at another 56 million to die.
Growing exponentially.
And on that point, and Vice President Davidson, that we now have, as you may know, a county tree mortality task force for the bug kill that's led by county administrative CAO's office, and has participation from all kinds of stakeholders, including state OES and CAL FIRE and SPI and all kinds of other agencies that are there. And we're a part of that as well. And so now we will actually be tracking our costs associated with dealing with this. It's going to affect us. We've already had a number of calls from people who live adjacent to our facilities wanting to know about the issue, how would we address trees. One of the things we found out from that meeting that was interesting, there is the ability to, for us, and it will take time, this won't happen overnight, but we will have the ability to seek reimbursement, at least 75% of the funds, maybe more, FEMA weighs in to be able to take trees out. So there's a lengthy process you have to go through to get to the point where you can actually take it out and get reimbursed. But we're going to be assessing that as on our own property, and making sure that the hazard trees and anything that poses additional risk of fire or whatever is dealt with.
Does the county have to declare a disaster for that, and have they?
They have declared an emergency. Yeah, we are one of 8 or 10 counties, I believe. 8. Okay.
Have they declared it? Okay.
And I got to say, I really appreciate their leadership on this. Brian Moss is doing a terrific job. We had 2 supervisors, Oliver and Wright, who were both at the meetings. I'm sure others participate as well. But it was extremely helpful just to get real-time information about what's going on. And it is very, very scary situation when SBI talks about the potential to lose the seed stock for ponderosa. I mean, it's just an amazing situation. So, and one that, according to CAL FIRE, we will likely be dealing with for probably up to 10 years from now. So I'm sure we'll be back, and there'll be costs, and we'll have to track those and seek reimbursement.
All right, next board meeting, Wednesday, June 8th, 9 a.m., regular board meeting. Then we have a budget workshop on June 9th. June 22nd, we'll have another regular board meeting. Meeting's adjourned.
Dave, did you want to take a
I thought
look
that was
at
going to be
this?
at 2 o'clock.